Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the San Francisco Board of Supervisors meeting of Tuesday, December 6, 2016. Madam Clerk, can you please call the roll?
Thank you, Madam President. Supervisor Avalos. Avalos present. President Breed.
Here.
Breed present. Supervisor Campos.
Present.
Campos present. Supervisor Cohen.
Present.
Cohen present. Supervisor Farrell.
Present.
Farrell present. Supervisor Kim. Kim not present. Supervisor Marr.
Here.
Marr present. Supervisor Peskin.
Present.
Peskin present. Supervisor Tang.
Present.
Tang present. Supervisor Yee. Yee present. Madam President, you have a quorum.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Can you please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Thank you. And before we get started with the agenda, I would like to ask for just a moment of silence in memory of the 36 lives lost in the Oakland fire at the Ghost Ship. At this time, I know that members of the board will be doing an in memoriam later on during roll call, but I would like a moment of silence in their memory. Thank you very much, everyone. Madam Clerk, please, are there any communications?
Yes, Madam President. This is more directed to the public, as board members are aware that yesterday, December 5th, 2016, we received a communication at approximately 12:15 from a former member of this body, former Supervisor Scott Wiener, indicating his resignation from the Board of Supervisors representing District 8 as he took the oath of office as a member of the California State Senate, which precipitates a vacancy in the office of District 8 Supervisor.
Thank you. Colleagues, are there any changes to the October 25th, 2016 board meeting minutes? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve those minutes? Motion by Supervisor Campos, seconded by Supervisor Yee. Colleagues, can we take that without objection? Without objection, those meeting minutes will be approved after public comment. All right, Madam Clerk, please read the consent agenda.
Items 1 through 3 are considered routine. A member may object and have an item removed and considered separately.
Roll call vote.
On the consent calendar, items 1 through 3, Supervisor Peskin.
Aye.
Peskin, aye. Supervisor Tang.
Aye.
Tang, aye. Supervisor Yee.
Aye.
Yee, aye. Supervisor Avalos. Avalos, aye. Supervisor Breed.
Aye.
Breed, aye. Supervisor Campos.
Aye.
Campos, aye. Supervisor Cohen.
Aye.
Cohen, aye. Supervisor Farrell.
Aye.
Farrell, aye. Supervisor Kim.
Aye.
Kim, aye. Supervisor Marr.
Aye.
Marr, aye. There are 10 ayes.
Those items are finally passed unanimously. Madam Clerk, please read items 4 through 9.
Items 4 through 9 are 6 resolutions. Item 4 establishes the Infrastructure and Revitalization Financing District, or the IRFD number 1, and project areas therein to finance the construction and or acquisition of facilities on Treasure Island and Yerba Buena Island, to provide for the annexation, and provides the public notice and call for a public hearing on the now expired date for December 6, 2016 at 3 p.m. on the formation of the district and project areas. Item 5 authorizes the Director of Public Finance to prepare an infrastructure financing plan. Item 6 is related to the intent to issue bonds for the IRFD. Item 7 is related to establishing a Community Facilities District number 2016-1, Improvement Area number 1, or CFT, and a future annexation area, and calls for a public hearing, provides the public notice and for a now expired date of December 6, 2016 at 3 p.m. on the formation of the district and project areas. And item 8 is related to the intent to incur bonded indebtedness and other debt in an amount not to exceed $5 billion for the CFD. And item 9 approves the infrastructure financing plan for City Infrastructure and Revitalization Financing District 1, Treasure Island, and the project areas therein.
Supervisor Kim?
Thank you, President Breed. As colleagues know, in 2011, the Board of Supervisors adopted a series of resolutions to approve numerous entitlements and transaction documents related to the Treasure Island Yerba Buena Island Development Project. The city is obligated under our disposition and development agreement dated June 7th of 2011 to establish the required public financing mechanisms as the development commences. This project includes 8,000 new homes, 2,173, or 27.2% of which are affordable. And with the adoption of the DDA in 2011, revised projections have identified a gap of $382 million across a total cost of $968 million to construct these 1,866 units. As you may recall, during this time, this originally started as a redevelopment project, but with the impending threat of the dissolution of redevelopment, Treasure Island moved to IRFD financing model, of which we are working to pass today at the Board of Supervisors. Colleagues, there are a set of resolutions before us today, starting with item 4, to create the Infrastructure Financing and Revitalizing District and Community Facilities District that will allow TIDA to begin to receive the property tax increment that we can set aside for affordable housing along with infrastructure for the island. We have made some amendments, given some of the concerns that were brought up at this board from my office and several of our colleagues, to clarify the city's role in how we address the gap, particularly in the affordable housing funding. Colleagues, the clerk has passed out copies of these new clauses, and we have also worked closely with Supervisor Peskin's office on these clauses as well. I'd like to, first of all, acknowledge and thank Bob Beck, our Treasure Island Director, who is here today, along with Nadia Sase, our Public Finance Director, and the City Attorney's Office, Mark Blake, Charles Sullivan, and John Givner, for working with us over the past couple of weeks to put these together. While it does not resolve the gap in affordable housing finance, it certainly places a greater commitment from the Mayor's Office of Housing towards contributing to this gap, and also puts in a series of accountability measures to ensure that not just the market rate housing gets built, but the affordable housing that we promised our community and our city at 27.2% gets included in the project as well. So per our discussions, we do want to really appreciate the movement and commitment made by the Mayor's Office of Housing to provide resources to achieving the goal of affordable housing, including $4 million in the fiscal year 2018 to fund pre-development work, $30 million over the next 10 years, and finally $250 million over the life of the project. The city, while the city has agreed to make this matter a legislative priority at the state level, we also want to work towards a commitment from the city to invest in a citywide affordable housing general obligation bond by 2024, should the city not be able to secure the state and other funds to fill the gap that we had, that TIDA and Mayor's Office of Housing had presented to the Board of Supervisors a few weeks ago. In terms of oversight, we are also requesting that every 6 months, TIDA submit to the Board of Supervisors a report on the status of the affordable housing funding pursuits and construction, and will include a similar update in the city's biannual capital plan. TIDA will engage with TIDI as a third-party entity. This is the Treasure Island Homeless Initiative Development nonprofit that has been working closely with the development and the community since the inception of this project in the 1990s to ensure and monitor the implementation of the project community benefits, including the affordable housing responsibilities for the city. While this is not a perfect solution, what we are presenting to the board today does give me greater confidence and comfort that over the future years, when many of us will no longer be serving, that there is enough accountability mechanisms in place and oversights as well as commitments from the Mayor's office that we will be able to build the affordable housing along with the market rate housing for this development. So colleagues, I have submitted the various amendments before you today. Should I ask the city attorney if I need to actually read them to the record, or if my description is enough? Great, thank you. So I'd like to make a motion to amend item number 4 with the following amendments that I've submitted to the board.
Thank you. Supervisor Kim has made a motion to amend, seconded by Supervisor Farrell. Colleagues, can we take the amendments without objection? Without objection, the amendments passed unanimously. And seeing no other names on the roster, colleagues, we will first vote on items 4 through 8 separately, and then we will vote on item number 9 because we are acting as the taxing agency. So with that, colleagues, for items 4 through 8, can we take those items?
Madam President, my apologies. Clarification to Supervisor Kim. Were you setting the new date for the hearings as January 24th? The resolutions 4, 6, 7, and 8 mention an expired date. And I think part of the amendments you were making earlier included the new January 24th date.
These are the amendments that I've submitted for item number 4, Madam Clerk.
Okay.
I'm asking a question.
Oh, yes, the amendments that you made were submitted for item 4. However, items 4, 6, 7, and 8 also mention an expired date. The board is setting a future hearing date for a special election for the Treasure Island IFD. The 4 resolutions I mentioned have an expired date, and I believe, working with your staff, they indicated that a January 24th date was what they were expecting you to amend the new dates to.
So I actually don't know the answer to that question.
Okay.
So
Okay.
the suggested date is now January 24th, 2017.
That's
And I'm just
correct.
looking at Director Beck, and he is nodding his head. Is that the appropriate date to set?
Mr. Beck,
The modified language.
can you please identify yourself?
Sorry. Robert Beck with Treasure Island Development Authority. And the modifications as submitted for Resolution 4 do reflect the proposed hearing date of January 24th and would request conforming changes to the other resolutions.
Great.
Okay, Madam Clerk, is that clear?
That is clear, Madam President. We just need, if Supervisor Kim is going to make the changes to the conforming changes to the resolution 6, 7, and 8, we just need a second.
We had a second by Supervisor Farrell.
Thank you.
All right. With that, colleagues, on items 4 through 8, can we take those same house, same call? Without objection, those items pass unanimously. And on item number 9, acting as the taxing agency, can we take that item, same house, same call? Without objection, the resolution is adopted unanimously. All right. Next item, please.
Item 10 is an ordinance to amend the Health Code to revise the definition of development projects subject to the requirements for an alternate water source system and the definitions of large and small residential projects subject to specific requirements for such a system, and to provide authorization for the review and approval of alternative means of compliance and to affirm the Planning Department's CEQA determination.
Thank you. And if members of the public can please exit the chamber quietly, we would really appreciate it. Thank you very much for being here today. Colleagues, on item number 11.
10, Madam President.
Oh, item number 10. Can we take that item, same house, same call? Without objection, the ordinance is finally passed unanimously. Item number 11.
Item 11 is an ordinance to amend the police code to prohibit owners of multiple occupancy buildings from interfering with choice of communication service providers by occupants, to establish requirements for communications services providers to obtain access to multiple occupancy buildings, and to establish remedies for violation of the access requirement.
Supervisor Farrell.
Thank you, President Breed. Colleagues, in front of us today is legislation that I authored along with my co-sponsor, Supervisor Eric Marr. That's a first-in-the-country local ordinance to once and for all affirm the rights of tenants in multi-unit buildings to choose their qualified internet service provider. This bill effectively closes a very glaring loophole that's been used by some to effectively deny true choice and competition here in San Francisco. I think we all believe that is very important, but unfortunately for tens of thousands of our city's residents and businesses and tenants, they often lack true choice in picking this internet service provider. Many of our city's tenants that live in multi-dwelling unit buildings face multiple barriers or outright denied their choices. The scope of this problem is actually pretty alarming and why I believe we must approve this bill today. Local ISPs estimate that hundreds of multi-unit buildings representing more than 50,000 units face impediments that effectively block providers from accessing buildings or providing services. I've heard numerous examples from local providers on the commercial side as well. And there are also real-life examples that we heard at committee last Wednesday when the founders of local small businesses and tenants had talked about not being able to provide the service here in our city. And as we sit here as the innovation capital of the world, that we are denying tenants access to their internet provider of choice, to me, is simply wrong. And I do want to thank Supervisors Tang and Yee for supporting this at committee as well. These small businesses are just looking to compete for consumers, and I believe we should grant them that opportunity. Front page stories on the Chronicle have talked about this issue. Numerous people have talked about their own situations where their landlords or property owners have refused them the internet service provider of their choice. And while the federal government outlaws owners, landlords, and property managers from entering into exclusive agreements with service providers, de facto exclusivity agreements and other barriers continue to persist throughout San Francisco and other cities around the country. Here in San Francisco, we have over 100,000 San Francisco residents that do not have internet access at home. And the latest figures we have is that 14% of our public school children don't have internet access at home. And when they are being asked and forced to take tests online, that they don't have this type of access, to me, is simply unacceptable. Providing more choices in competition is key in today's market, and it's key to providing more affordable and quality internet service. From the date of this legislation that we introduced it, we've worked diligently with stakeholders representing internet service providers, commercial and residential owners, and tenants groups. We met numerous times. As a result, we accepted 12 out of 16 proposed amendments that these groups collectively offered that strengthened the legislation and addressed their reasonable concerns. We did not come to agreement on a few amendments that would have effectively further denied building access and continued to perpetuate the denial of tenants here in San Francisco choice, as well as amendments keeping the status quo of de facto exclusivity that continues to exist in San Francisco today. So in terms of the ordinance itself, it firmly establishes the rights of tenants in multi-unit buildings to choose a qualified internet service provider of their choice. It prohibits property owners, managers, and landlords from interfering with this choice and will stop them from denying service providers access to their buildings. Only internet service providers certified by the California Public Utilities Commission will be authorized to provide internet service when requested by a tenant. The policy also establishes parameters and requirements for how and when qualified ISPs can provide service to multi-unit buildings. In committee, we inserted numerous technical amendments that strengthen the legislation and I thought addressed reasonable concerns from internet service providers, residential owners, and tenants. We included amendments that allow property owners a reasonable time to respond to a provider's request to gain building access or to provide service. We added clarifying language that will require ISPs to present visual plans for installation before gaining building access, use licensed contractors for installation, have adequate insurance, and fully indemnify owners for any damages that may be caused during installation. And to protect against frivolous lawsuits, we added amendments that will require that notice must be given to the city in advance of any civil penalties accruing or an owner or provider bringing suit against each other. We address concerns around limitations of access where there may be lead paint, asbestos, and in historical and architectural significant buildings. And finally, we're ensuring that ISPs are only using the infrastructure necessary to provide service when the inside wiring is owned by the property owner. All these amendments strengthen the legislation and are a result, again, of numerous meetings with all these different constituent groups. Colleagues, I strongly believe that internet access is a huge deal here in San Francisco and across our country. Again, as we sit here as the innovation capital of the world, that we are not doing everything to maximize choice for our residents, to maximize choices for tenants, and to do everything we can in our power to close this digital divide. I believe we're going to be doing our residents a disservice. This is a pro-tenant, pro-consumer, and pro-competition policy that has the opportunity to serve as a national model for other cities across our country. I want to thank a number of the groups that came together on this legislation, the multiple internet service providers that worked on this, different property owner groups from BROMA, the Apartment Association, CBH, tenant and internet service providers. I want to thank Bill Sanders, our city attorney, who did an amazing job, Jess Montejano for my staff, and everybody else that was involved. This was truly a collaborative effort, and I think will have a monumental impact for our residents here in San Francisco. So, colleagues, I'd ask for your support.
Thank you, Supervisor Farrell. Supervisor Peskin.
Thank you, Madam President. Colleagues, first of all, I just want to commend the efforts of Supervisor Farrell and his staff. Obviously, fostering competition and internet access are absolutely laudable public policy goals. However, we are in receipt of a attorney-client privileged memorandum with regard to potential legal issues. And there may be a workaround on that as set forth in that memorandum. Insofar as the memo is attorney-client privileged, we probably shouldn't be discussing it in public. But what I wanted to do was to see if, with Supervisor Farrell and the board's consent, we could go into closed session to talk about those issues and see whether or not, the potential costs of that litigation set forth in the memorandum, but to see if there's a workaround that could obviate any exposure or reduce exposure by the city. So I would like to make a motion to continue this into closed session.
Okay, Supervisor Peskin has made a motion to continue this item in closed session, seconded by Supervisor Kim. Colleagues, can we take that roll call vote or without objection? Okay, without objection, this item will be continued into closed session at the next meeting of Supervisor Farrell.
Hold on, sorry. What are we suggesting here in terms of continuing to another meeting?
Well, we have not calendared a closed session, and so at the next meeting of the Board of Supervisors, there will need to be, we would need to calendar for the next meeting, which would mean that this item will be continued into closed session next week on December 13, 2016.
Okay, so may I speak,
Yes.
Madam President? So, colleagues, I'm all for supporting further dialogue with our city attorney's office. This is an attempt by some of the incumbent players here in the city of San Francisco in order to thwart the point of this legislation. They want to continue to deny access to our tenants here in San Francisco by these backdoor deals that they have signed with building owners here in the city of San Francisco. Supervisor Peskin, I appreciate you carrying their water. If that's the will of my colleagues, I have no problem talking with our city attorney about it. But from my perspective, this is not something that I will support at this point in time. If we had a conversation today about it, that's one thing. They want to simply be able to run out clocks, delay this here in the city of San Francisco. We have met with them, again, multiple times, made multiple amendments. At the end of the day, I will not sit here and support amendments to legislation that will continue to promote the status quo and deny tenants access of choice here in San Francisco. I think it's a horrible idea, and it's not something I will support. Further conversation with our city attorney's office is great. Again, from my perspective, my office has done that for weeks and weeks on end. I know what the issue is. I'm very familiar with it. I'm very comfortable where we are with this piece of legislation. I think it's an incredibly important piece of legislation, and I don't see the need to delay it. But again, I'm more than happy to continue to talk with our city attorney's office, but let's be very clear what the point of this is. It's a point to delay, to carry the ball, carry the bucket of water for Comcast and some of our other internet service providers that have been the ones denying choice in San Francisco for decades. And I think that's a mistake, but if we're going to do it, we should all be very clear about exactly what we're doing here and the intent behind this.
Thank you, Supervisor Farrell. Supervisor Peskin.
Thank you, Madam President, and through the President to Supervisor Farrell. First of all, I take exception at your unfounded allegations. Secondly, I think that we should be clear about the fact that there are winners and losers in this legislation. And to the extent that the primary author of this wants to make allegations relative to exclusivity arrangements with current ISP providers, there are also individuals in the community and in the internet community who feel that this is a special piece of legislation for one other monster player in the arena named Google. So rather than go down that road, why don't we get some advice about exclusivity and liability and the contracts clause from our attorney and then move forward appropriately.
Thank you, Supervisor Peskin. Supervisor Farrell.
I appreciate, Supervisor Peskin, that you are literally taking the talking points from Comcast, Frontier Communications, excuse me, Frontier Communications, which is, sorry. Water? Got us, Raleigh.
Sir, we got it.
Thanks.
Supervisor, you want
Thank
me to?
you. No, I'm all right.
Okay.
It really, it's cracking my voice up that that truly we're hearing talking points from Comcast, from one of my colleagues. Talking points from Frontier Communications, was one of the biggest multi-billion-dollar publicly traded cable companies in our country, and those are the talking points we're going off of here in these board chambers. Again, I have no problem having discussion with our city attorney's office, but let's be very clear. And then an accusation from one of my colleagues that this is benefiting one other player in the space. With all due respect, Supervisor Peskin, I haven't met with that player in the course of this legislation. And this has to do with a broad scope of people here in the city of San Francisco, and it's about tenants, tens of thousands of tenants who've been denied access of their internet service provider of choice. To me, that is wrong. I'm willing to take a stand on that. That's why I introduced this legislation. That's why we work so hard on this legislation. And it has all to do with a lot of other small businesses in the city of San Francisco that want to do this, that want to move forward, and that are trying to provide access, internet access to tenants and residents across our city. So thank you for the comment around accusations. But again, trumpeting talking points of Comcast and all these other players, from my perspective, simply doesn't belong here in these board chambers. Again, that being said, I'm more than happy to talk with our city attorney about it. But let's be clear, when we're voting on that, what exactly we're doing and why we're doing it. And again, at that point, from a continuation perspective, to continue it so that we can hear from the likes of Comcast and other players who've been denying the internet access and choice of that here in the city of San Francisco for decades, to me, is not something I want to stand for.
Thank you, Supervisor Farrell. Supervisor Tang.
I just have a question. I'm wondering if our city attorney's office could maybe address some practical questions that are perhaps not giving away what's in the memo, but if there are actually questions about just the substantive part of the legislation, if perhaps we could do that here out in public.
Yes.
Supervisor Peskin, or through the chair to Supervisor Peskin, perhaps we could just start that dialogue with our very capable city attorney here.
Unfortunately, your very capable city attorney does not know the details of this dialogue, but I can get somebody down here if you could give me a couple of minutes.
Okay. Before we vote on the continuance, maybe we can move on with our agenda, if that's appropriate, or we can, at this point, vote on the continuance. Supervisor Peskin, do you want to wait until we have more details and ask the specific questions of the things that you're most concerned about and determine whether or not the city attorney's office is able to answer those questions publicly now?
I'm happy to waive the privilege if the board so desires, and I can ask all of these things in public, but I don't know if the city attorney wants us to waive the privilege in this memo.
Okay. Well, clearly, before I call on Supervisor Campos, clearly we definitely need to make sure that the appropriate city attorney is here to address those specific questions, the one who is familiar with the particular memo in question. Supervisor Campos.
Thank you, Madam President. Through the chair to our distinguished city attorney, is that even possible without, can we waive the privilege without noticing that item, or is that something that we could do today, or is that something that we would have to do at a future meeting?
Supervisor Campos, members of the board, you could waive the privilege without having the item on the agenda. It's part of your discussion of this matter.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I think at this time, before we vote on a continuance, we ought to wait until the city attorney has the appropriate city attorney present in order to address those issues, and we can decide on a continuance at that time. Without objection, we will move forward. Madam Clerk, please call the next item.
Item 12, Madam President, 17 and 18 together.
Yes.
Item 12 is an ordinance to appropriate $176 million of the Series 2017A Health and Safety General Obligation Bond proceeds to Public Works in fiscal years 2016 through 17 for improvements and seismic strengthening of public health and safety facilities for critical community and mental health, emergency response and safety, and homeless shelter and services. Items 17 is a resolution to provide for the issuance of a not to exceed $350 million aggregate principal amount of taxable and tax-exempt general obligation bonds, to authorize the issuance and sale of such bonds, providing for the levy of a tax to pay the principal and interest thereof, adopting findings under CEQA in conformity with the Planning Code, and granting general authority to city officials to take necessary actions in connections with the issuance and sale of such bonds. And item 18 is a resolution to authorize the issuance and sale of a not to exceed $176 million in aggregate principal amount of tax-exempt general obligation bonds, prescribing the form and terms of such bonds, approving the form of the official notice of sale, and granting general authority to city officials to take necessary actions in connection with the authorization, issuance, sale, and delivery of such bonds.
Colleagues, can we take those items, same house, same call? Without objection, the ordinance passes on the first reading, and those resolutions are adopted unanimously. Item number 13.
Item 13 is an ordinance to waive the banner fees under Public Works Code Section 184.78 for up to 300 banners to be placed by the Office of Economic and Workforce Development to publicize the city's Shop and Dine in the 49 campaign.
Same house, same call. Without objection, the ordinance is passed unanimously on the first reading. Next item.
Item 14 is a resolution to retroactively authorize the Department of Public Health to accept and expend a $133,000 grant from the Regents of the University of California for technical assistance for certain countries to provide AIDS relief from April 1st, 2016 through March 31st, 2017.
Same house, same call. Without objection, the resolution is adopted unanimously. And Madam Clerk, it's past 2:30, and we have 2:30 commendations. And Supervisor Peskin, it is my understanding that you have a 2:30 commendation.
Thank you, Madam President. Colleagues, today I am delighted to honor a constituent, a friend, and a longtime District 3 neighbor and leader, Eleanor Burke, who's joined here by her husband, Bernie, and neighbor, Linda Marks. And, of course, many of you might know Eleanor and Bernie as they were the godparents, if you will, of Raphael Mandelman. But this is upon the occasion of Eleanor's most recently released book, A Walker Sketchbook of San Francisco. In 2015, Eleanor resolved, if I can say it because you wrote it in the book, at the age of 77, to walk every street in San Francisco. So that was some 700 miles, and she accomplished that in less than 12 months, and then turned it into a book of sketches and some 20 walks. And she has shared her passion for art and sketching and walking in a previous book, Sketching San Francisco's Neighborhoods, A Visual Journey Through a Diverse, Unique City. It is a compilation of sketches of some of San Francisco's most beloved landmarks and little-known treasures and neighborhoods. Her illustrated histories and narratives reveal a San Francisco that I'm proud to call home. It's full of motley characters, rich cultural history, and generations of experiences that can only be had on our side of the Golden Gate Bridge. This came out just in time for the holidays, so I figured I would help Eleanor with her sales, but most importantly, it really is about her passion for San Francisco and its neighborhoods, and Supervisor Tang is looking at it and passing it around, but it captures each and every one of your supervisorial districts, from Miraloma Park to the Sunset, to the Richmond, to the Bayview, to the OMI and the Ingleside, and of course starts in North Beach and Russian Hill, where Eleanor and Bernie live. And with that, thank you all, colleagues, for signing this certificate of honor and recognition for Ms. Burke, which I will present to her. And why don't you come up and say a few words, Eleanor? Congratulations on your 700 miles of walking and that wonderful illustration.
Thank you. Second one. This one? Gosh, I don't know what to say. I can second, though, that this is a really special city, and I've lived here all my life, basically. And every day I grow more proud of being a San Franciscan. I love the richness of the diversity of the city. I love the neighborhoods that are all so distinct from each other. I love it all. I did this book because I didn't feel that the first book I did really covered everything, and I was on a motor scooter the whole time. So I decided to, by foot, you see a whole lot more. Also, I did it because people were telling me that this is people who don't live here mostly. I mean, people who live here know this, not true. That it's a dangerous city. You can't walk the streets. You certainly wouldn't walk south of Market any place or around the Tenderloin or whatever by yourself as a woman, and I was 77 at the time. I'm older than that. But I think that's baloney. I walk along, and all the times I walked every one of those streets, I never had a single moment of nervousness except
Bees.
Except the bees. I got swarmed by a bunch of bees in OMI, and the beekeeper apologized because he was purposely agitating the bees without checking out to see who was in the park at the same time. And I was there, and those bees followed me for 3 blocks, but they didn't sting me. I just think San Francisco, even though it has all these hills, is an amazing city to walk because it's beautiful. You have to walk hills, that's true. And walking does so much more than driving by in a car, or being on a motor scooter like I did the first time. I have some favorite neighborhoods, of course. I love Russian Hill because that's where I live. I love North Beach because it's so close to me and there's always something going on there and it's fun. I love Bernal Heights at the villagey kind of feel of Bernal Heights. I love walking around there and seeing people out on the streets talking to each other. I have a lot of criteria for what makes a good neighborhood, and it meets them all. And I love the special spots in San Francisco, like Heron's Head out in Hunters Point, where it's a bird preserve run by the National Park Service or the Port Authority, I can't remember which. And it's just beautiful. It's very sublime. Go out there, you see all kinds of birds. Every time you go out, you see different birds. I've seen birds I once saw in South Africa. I've never seen them anyplace else, oyster catchers. And I love Cayuga Park, the park that was made by Demetrios Braceros. It's unbelievable. I mean, it was a trash pit, and now it's amazing. I take people there all the time, and they're always amazed that there's all this carved artwork all around the sides. I think, though, when I started walking, I mean, obviously there's a lot that I've left off, and there's some of my own biases. I have a picture of opening day at the ballpark because I love baseball, and so that had to be in there. And Delancey Street is one of my favorite restaurants because I love Delancey Street, and I love Mimi Silbert, and I love all that they do. So I put that in there. I think, though, what I wanted to do was to have my favorite walks. I thought I ought to write this down for everybody. You know, what are the best places to walk in San Francisco? And there are 20 of them in there. And they're pretty detailed, and that's, I think, what makes it different from the other book I did. If you want to know where to find the book, you can find it in a bookstore. You can, that's not too hard. And Sonny asked me if there were any more books planned. This is so exhausting a process. Giving birth to a baby is nothing compared to doing a book. Any of you who've ever done a book probably know that. But right now, we have 4,000 books stored in our 2-bedroom condo that we hauled upstairs, 4,200 pounds of books. Just amazing. So that's a physical effort I don't know if I'd ever do again, but who knows? I'll forget about it. Anyway, I feel honored to actually be a member of this city, and so, it's just amazing to recognize it in the way that this book does, I think. Thank you.
Next up, we have Supervisor Eric Marr.
Thank you. Colleagues, today I ask you to join me in honoring an amazing expert and community leader, Kavus Ghana Basiri. And if Kavus could come forward, please come forward. He's been the director of an agency, the Richmond Area Multi-Services, or RAMS, located in the Richmond District, but having a national focus, a really amazing model of multicultural, culturally competent mental health services for communities. He's soon transitioning into a new role as the director of our Department of Public Health Behavioral Health Services division. Kavus Ghana Basiri is an expert, skilled clinician, teacher, and trailblazer who's dedicated his last 13 years or more to RAMS and leadership in the Richmond District, the entire school district, and our city. He's helped to vastly expand the reach and scope of community mental health services throughout our city, both increasing capacity of current programs as well as bringing a greater array of vocational rehabilitation, employment services, peer-based services into the fold. I know at Washington High School, for example, the peer-based mental health support systems of young people is really a great testament of Richmond Area Multi-Services and Kavus's leadership. Also, prior to his work at RAMS, Kavus served as the Director of Operations at the highly successful Bridge to Wellness program, partial hospitalization and intensive outpatient programs formerly operated by Department of Psychiatry at SF General in collaboration with RAMS, which started in 1995. I know when we were debating Laura's Law, for example, here at this board, I relied on key really experienced people like Kavus for advice, and lots of people do that with his expertise. He was also the Associate Clinical Professor in the Department of Psychiatry at UCSF's School of Medicine and is a recipient of the Excellent in Teaching Award by the Academy of Medical Educators at UCSF. Mr. Basiri has served as one of the contributors and consultants for the DSM-5 on gender and cross-cultural issues and has been invited to travel to many countries as a volunteer healthcare professional on a local, national, and international level. I should reveal that in 1984, when I had less gray hair, I was a receptionist at RAMS. That was 32 years ago, and the agency from that time to now is totally different. I think because of Kavus's leadership, the respect and awareness of the models that they've developed are nationally and even globally renowned. I'm confident that his vision and leadership will be brought from the Richmond District to our whole city as he becomes the Director of Behavioral Health Services for our city. It's a role that he will continue to influence and guide through his compassion and culturally competent and multicultural lens to meet the needs of our very diverse communities and especially our disenfranchised and underserved populations. I'd like to thank Kavus for the leadership in the Richmond, the city, for young people, really nurturing an amazing agency, all the staff and board members of RAMS who I've talked to kind of also totally agree of what he brought to RAMS, he now will be able to expand citywide. I also want to just thank him for being a good friend and always encouraging me in my role on the school board to on the Board of Supervisors as well. Please join me in giving a round of applause to Kavus Ghana Basiri. Please come forward, Kavus.
Well, thank you. Thank you for this generous recognition. I really appreciate it. I've been here many times at hearings and advocating for services. Soon I'll be a city employee and will be in a different role advocating for behavioral health services. I also want to thank you, Supervisor Marr, for your 8 years of devoted service to the city, always listening, always hearing people out, preserving and protecting services, and also just keeping San Francisco healthy through your San Franciscans healthy through your initiatives and partnerships. I've tried to do my part in the last 21 years in San Francisco, the last 13 years at Rams, Inc., to basically deliver and organize services for the community that are culturally competent and quality services, and also advocate for people who are underserved, underrepresented, the immigrant community, and address the issue of stigma when it comes to mental health and mental illness. So we know there's no health without mental health, and we know there's no social justice and quality health care without quality behavioral health services that are culturally competent. So I hope that, I think about it that as a San Franciscan now, I live and work in San Francisco, I feel really privileged to be here and work here and serve this community and be a part of a city that cares for its people, is inclusive, and stands up for what's right and brings people together in a positive way. I really feel privileged for that. And I'm reminded of a quote by Dr. Carolyn Payton, the first African American and the first female and psychologist who was the head of U.S. Peace Corps, who said, "Who must do the hard things? Those who can. Who must do the impossible things? Those who care." So thank you for caring, and thank you for doing the right thing and doing the hard work. And I'm humbled by this recognition.
Thank you for your service and congratulations. And that ends our commendations for today. We will return to our regular agenda. Madam Clerk, please call item number 15.
Item 15 is a resolution pursuant to Administrative Code Section 6.60B to approve the airport director's declaration of an emergency for seawall erosion at the ends of airport runways 19L and 19R. Estimated repairs to cost more than $250,000.
Okay, colleagues, can we take item number 15, same house, same call? Without objection, the resolution is adopted unanimously. Let's go back to item number 11 now that we have our city attorney expert in the field joining us. Please identify yourself.
Deputy City Attorney William Sanders.
Thank you for being here, Mr. Sanders. Supervisor Marr.
Actually, thank you to Mr. Delventhal and Mr. Sanders for being here. I wanted to say that I really want to vote on this measure on first reading and second reading. I think if we don't vote on it today, it will leave many of us out that are leaving this board. I feel very strongly, as Supervisor Farrell mentioned, the struggle to close the digital divide, to really look out for seniors and people with disabilities, like the Tech Council and Marie Jobling and others have done, closing the homework gap for low-income families that don't have access to high-speed internet. I really am not as concerned about the large telecommunications companies that have been mentioned. To me, it's monkey brains. It's a smaller internet service that many people need much more choice. And I think this is an issue that if we voted on it today on first reading, we could still get the closed session advice. And then on second reading, if that advice changes anything, we could cast our votes differently. So I would urge my colleagues to understand how important this is to me to vote on. I want us to be a giga city and a tech city, but I don't want to leave low-income people, families, seniors, and people with disabilities behind. I think this is good legislation that Supervisor Farrell has introduced, and I would like to vote on this today if possible, but still get the, we had the cautionary memo, but also a closed session with our attorneys to advise us. But if we don't vote today on first reading, then I fear that my vote as a member of the Board of Supervisors that's worked on this issue with coalitions and others for many years, and then more recently with Supervisor Farrell, I fear that my voice, all the research and others that my staff, like Scott Blood, to all of my staff have worked on will not be heard. So I urge us to vote on this today, colleagues.
And just for clarity, you want, because I want to be clear, there has been a motion, it has been seconded to continue this item into closed session, and your suggestion is that we do not do that and that we vote on it today, for sure.
I'm not sure what the order is. If going into closed session but still allowing us to vote on first reading today, I would be okay with that.
Okay, and then Supervisor Peskin has requested that we consider waiving privilege and have the discussion openly today to get our questions answered, correct, Supervisor Peskin?
Subject to conferring with the city attorney in open session. I don't know if the city attorney wants... I'm open to that idea. I don't know if that would compromise our litigation position. So if the city attorney is going to support our doing that, that was one way to be able to discuss these issues and vote on it today. Otherwise, have to be continued for noticing requirements to next week.
Okay. Supervisor Farrell?
Thank you, Madam President. In terms of open session with our city attorney's office, as much as I'm a supporter of this legislation, obviously, I think that's generally potentially setting a bad precedent here. It's not something that we've done that I can recall since being on the Board of Supervisors. I think one way to accomplish this, and the way Supervisor Marr articulated, is to vote on first reading today, but also hold a closed session next week before second reading. That way we can get the legal questions out of the way, Comcast concerns can be addressed, and that way also Supervisor Marr and those colleagues that would want to could support the legislation.
Thank you. Okay, so at this time, Supervisor Peskin?
I do want to say for the record that all of the members of this body have received communications from supporters and opponents. Many of the opponents actually are building owners. I don't think we've received, to my knowledge, any communications electronically or in writing from Comcast or AT&T, which seem to be the predominant holders of these exclusive agreements. But I know we have all received numerous letters from building owners who have issues with legislation. So I don't want to lose that fact either.
Thank you, Supervisor Peskin. Supervisor Kim.
Thank you. I do have a number of questions on the legislation. I actually support the overall intent, and we certainly heard from many tenants who would like to see more choice in terms of the communication choices that they make here in San Francisco. However, I have a number of questions regarding the legality of the ordinance before us, and I don't feel comfortable making a first reading vote, and perhaps this is really to my colleagues, not to the city attorney, before really understanding the risks involved with the legislation before us. So I don't know if there's any way, I'm assuming that there's no way for us to hold closed session on this item today. Is that correct, Madam President?
Unfortunately not, because it hasn't been noticed.
I really respect that Supervisor Marr wants to have this ordinance voted on before his last meeting. I feel very uncomfortable voting on this without getting some questions answered before the first reading. So I don't feel comfortable with moving forward with a first reading vote without this closed session. So that's just what I'm going to put out there. Hopefully we can get our questions answered next week, and then at least have a first reading vote that includes the original sponsor of this legislation. That is what I would feel comfortable moving forward with.
Thank you, Supervisor Kim. Supervisor Campos.
I actually like this legislation. I think it makes a lot of sense to increase competition, and I don't see any, from a policy standpoint, why I would be against this. What I have issues right now is that, first of all, I don't think that we should waive the privilege because I just think that it is bad precedent to do that. I also have a problem if there are legal issues that we need to consider in us voting on something before actually discussing those legal issues. So I'm not comfortable voting on something before we have a closed session. Like I said, my intent, I want to vote for this, but I do think that we need to have a full vetting in closed session. If there are legal issues, maybe there aren't. I don't know, but I guess that's where I'm.
Thank you. Supervisor Yee?
Thank you. I'm willing to take a vote on it today with the reservation that if because I was part of the budget committee and discussing, was it budget committee? Yeah, discussing this and some of the questions that might be raised right now we didn't raise. And if I want to make the reservation that whether I vote for it today or not, that I could change if I get additional information from the closed session.
Thank you, Supervisor Yee. Supervisor Marr?
I'm trying to dig up the cautionary legal memo we got. It's common for us to do that. It came on November 28th, I think it is. We've had many days to look at it. I know I looked at it, and I guess I just feel like we should be ready after a few days. The city attorney's office spends a lot of time getting us the memos, and I know that I looked at it and I'm confident that I can vote today on this measure. I still appreciate my colleagues asking for a closed session. We could do that next week before we vote on our second reading. And if people's ideas are changed after hopefully having reviewed the cautionary memo and then getting more information from a December 13th closed session, they could change their vote if needed. So I just urge colleagues to allow us to vote on first reading today. Then we can go into closed session if it's agendized for the December 13th meeting. I think it's a very simple process. I understand the discomfort some of my colleagues would feel, but I feel very strongly about voting on first reading and second reading. This meeting, first reading, second reading, December 13th.
Thank you, Supervisor Marr. Supervisor Peskin?
Let me be clear. I've had extensive conversations with our legal counsel about the contents of the memorandum. I don't know if other individuals have. I thought it would be beneficial for all of us to collectively hear what counsel has to say and talk about ways that we can limit that liability. That's what I think that's the most responsible course of action going forward, given what this memo says and given what the possible litigation expenses are, which I would like to publicly reveal, but is part of a confidential memo. But suffice it to say, it is not inexpensive if we do not prevail and have to pay the other side's attorney's costs.
And just to be clear, was there a suggestion on a proposed amendment from the city attorney's office or something that you specifically thought would be appropriate to do?
So this is a bizarre
to limit the city's liability based on the cautionary memo?
So this is a bizarre conversation to have an open session. So without talking about the contents of the memo, the answer is the memo clearly points a direction that the board could take to limit that liability, which would require an amendment, which I think we should consider.
And so just to be clear, Supervisor Marr and Supervisor Farrell, the sponsors of the legislation, was made aware of that proposed amendment and decided not to move forward in it, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So I just want to make sure that we can talk about as much as we can possibly talk about. Okay, Supervisor Tang.
Thank you. And I'm not trying to say that the issues that I think Supervisor Peskin is raising are not important, but I do want to remind this board, I think we've had about, in 2015, roughly around 20 cautionary memos. In this year alone, we've had nearly 30 that I've counted so far. So I'm just putting it out there that it's not like it's rare that we get cautionary memos. I do take the city attorney's advice very seriously, and when I do have issues after reading it, I will contact them directly. So I just want to put it out there that it's not like we're just getting a memo on just this item.
Yes, and typically we will make adjustments as appropriate, and sometimes we choose not to make adjustments. So With that, we have a motion, and it's been seconded, and the motion is to continue this item into closed session for the meeting of December 13th, 2016. We're going to continue with that motion because no one has withdrawn that motion. So Supervisor Farrell, you have a comment.
Yeah, thank you, President. Just to be clear, I won't support this motion. I think, especially given the work of Supervisor Marr on this, I would like to support a motion that would allow us to vote on this on first reading today and we can happy to go into closed session next week. But so for this motion that's in front of us, I will not be supporting it.
Okay. See no names on the roster. Madam Clerk, on the motion.
I was going to ask
Supervisor Cohen.
Thank you, Madam President. I was going to ask you just to repeat the motion.
The motion that Supervisor Peskin made was to continue this item into closed session at the meeting of December 13, 2016, which is the next regularly scheduled board meeting. And it was seconded by Supervisor Kim. Okay. All right. Seeing no names on the roster, Madam Clerk, on the item, roll call vote.
Supervisor Peskin.
Aye.
Peskin, aye. Supervisor Tang?
No.
Tang, no. Supervisor Yee?
No.
Yee, no. Supervisor Avalos? Avalos, no. Supervisor Breed?
No.
Breed, no. Supervisor Campos? Campos, aye. Supervisor Cohen? Cohen, no. Supervisor Farrell?
Nope.
Farrell, no. Supervisor Kim?
Aye.
Kim, aye. Supervisor Marr?
No.
Marr, no. There are 3 ayes and 7 noes with Supervisors Tang, Yee, Avalos, Breed, Cohen, Farrell, and Marr in the dissent.
Okay, the motion fails. And on the item, which has not been amended, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Sorry.
Before we move forward,
Do we have to make a
Supervisor Yee?
I'm sorry. Supervisor Farrell made a suggestion. Do we need a motion to confirm that?
So we would just need to submit, from my understanding, a request for a closed session, and it will be on the next calendar, but I don't believe that we need to make a motion to hold a closed session.
Madam President, it's probably best that you make a motion to go into closed session, and that way we have authority to put it on the agenda as such.
Okay, so just to be clear, and can the city attorney confirm this, it's my understanding that we can introduce, without doing a motion, a request to do a closed session, and we don't necessarily have to do that openly through a vote. Can you please confirm?
I concur with the clerk that the best approach is for the board members to vote on
The best
closed
approach,
session.
but not necessarily required.
No, I can't say it's required.
Okay. Supervisor Peskin.
So 2 things. One, out of an abundance of caution, I'd like to make a motion to hear this item on second reading in closed session. And then for the record, let me state what Supervisor Yee stated, but in reverse, which is that I'm going to vote no on the first reading, but if we're able to get the information that we need in closed session, I reserve my right to vote yes on the second reading.
Okay, and is there a second to that? Seconded by Supervisor Yee. Supervisor Farrell.
We can take the motion separately. I was going to suggest one motion to vote on item number 11 and also a joint motion to go into closed session next week before it's heard on second reading, but we can certainly take them separately.
And my concern, again, at taking them in this particular way defeats the purpose of what we're trying to accomplish, which is why we should just completely vote on the item separately and allow a request to be introduced today for the purposes of going into closed session.
Madam President, my suggestion is a verbal motion, not a written motion.
Which we can take separately.
Sure.
And I've made that
Supervisor
motion.
Peskin.
Thank you, Madam President. Item 11 is now before this body, so we don't need a motion to vote on it. It is
exactly
now in front of us, and I've made a motion to have a closed session, a verbal motion at the December 13th meeting.
Okay, and we will take those items separately. First, we will take the motion separately to have a closed session at the meeting of December 13th, 2016. Madam Clerk, or colleagues, can we take the motion to have a closed session without objection? Without objection, the motion passes unanimously. And on item number 11, Madam Clerk, can you please call the roll?
Supervisor Peskin?
No.
Peskin, no. Supervisor Tang?
Aye.
Tang, aye. Supervisor Yee?
Aye.
Yee, aye. Supervisor Avalos? Avalos, aye. Supervisor Breed?
Aye.
Breed, aye. Supervisor Campos? Campos, aye. Supervisor Cohen?
Aye.
Cohen, aye. Supervisor Farrell?
Aye.
Farrell, aye. Supervisor Kim? Kim, aye. Supervisor Marr?
Aye.
Marr, aye. There are 9 ayes and 1 no, with Supervisor Peskin in the dissent.
The ordinance passes on the first reading. Let's go to item number 16, Madam Clerk.
Item 16 is a resolution to authorize the General Manager of the Public Utilities Commission to execute an Amendment Number 1 to the Planning and Engineering Project Design Services Agreement, number CS-389, for specialized planning and engineering services for the proposed new headworks facility at the Southeast Water Pollution Control Plant between the city and Corollo Engineers, Inc., to extend the contract for a total term through December 19th, 2023, at an additional amount of $19.5 million for the total agreement amount not to exceed $33.5 million.
Supervisor Peskin?
Thank you, Madam President. This is the first in what will ultimately be a multi-billion-dollar project. I ask that the PUC come before the new Board of Supervisors in February, when the next large item will be before us, to give the members of the board as well as the public a comprehensive look at what the CSIP program is and how it has changed and been rebaselined over time. But in the interim, I thought we could get just a brief synopsis of that, and Karen Kubik from the PUC is here today to share that with us briefly. You're not Karen.
He's here.
Karen. John Scarpullo with SPUC. Unfortunately, Karen had to run at 3 p.m. Supervisor Peskin is correct. We are going to be bringing several items to the Board of Supervisors in 2017. We're just starting with this amendment to the Headworks design contract, but we are also coming with the Headworks construction management contract, the biosolids design contract modification, an overall SSIP program construction management item, and finally a biosolids construction management item, as well as several EIRs. So we look forward to coming back to the board next year, and we look forward to presenting an overall look at the program at the next big item, as Supervisor Peskin has requested.
Thank you.
Supervisor Peskin?
That's it.
Okay. Madam Clerk, on the item, can you please call the roll?
On item 16, Supervisor Peskin.
Aye.
Peskin, aye. Supervisor Tang?
Aye.
Tang, aye. Supervisor Yee?
Aye.
Yee, aye. Supervisor Avalos? Avalos, aye. Supervisor Breed?
Aye.
Breed, aye. Supervisor Campos? Campos, aye. Supervisor Cohen?
Aye.
Cohen, aye. Supervisor Farrell? Farrell, aye. Supervisor Kim? Kim, aye. Supervisor Marr?
Aye.
Marr, aye. There are 10 ayes.
This resolution is adopted unanimously. Okay, Madam Clerk, let's go to item 19.
Item 19 is a resolution to authorize the Mayor's Office of Housing and Community Development to expend $595,000 SOMA Community Stabilization Fund dollars to address various impacts of destabilization on residents and businesses in the SOMA.
Same house, same call. Without objection, the resolution is adopted unanimously. Please call items 20 and 21 together.
Items 20 and 21 are two resolutions that authorize the Department of Technology and the Office of Contract Administration to enter into agreements between the City and On Point Technologies Sales, LLC. Item 20 is an amendment number 1 for Microsoft Online 365 to increase the agreement amount by $4.3 million for a total not to exceed amount of approximately $13.9 million through May 31st, 2017. And item 21 is amendment number 1 for the Microsoft Enterprise product for an amount not to exceed $14.7 million through May 31st, 2017.
Same house, same call. Without objection, those resolutions are adopted unanimously. Item 22.
Item 22 is a resolution to retroactively approve the fiscal year 2016 housing opportunities for persons with AIDS the HOPWA grant, and to authorize the mayor to accept and expend the city's fiscal year 2016 $1.4 million HOPWA grant from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development through November 30th, 2019.
Colleagues, can we take this item, same house, same call? Without objection, the resolution is adopted unanimously. Madam Clerk, please call items 23 and 25 together.
Item 23 is an ordinance to amend the Planning Code to add sections 249.15 to create the Mission and 9th Street Special Use District in the area generally bounded by Mission Street on the south, Lasky Street on the east, Assessor's Parcel Block number 3701, lot numbers 22, 23, and 24 on the west, and Assessor's Parcel Block numbers 3701, lot number 66 to the north, to amend the zoning map sheet SU 07 to create the Mission and 9th Street Special Use District, to amend zoning map sheet HT07 to change the height limit on Assessor's Parcel Block numbers 3701, lot numbers 20 and 21 from 120X to 200X, to affirm the Planning Department's CEQA determination and make the appropriate findings. And item 25 is an ordinance to amend the general plan by revising the height designation for Assessor's Parcel Block numbers 3701, lot numbers 20 and 21 on map 5 of the downtown area plan from 120X to 200X, adopting and making findings regarding the mitigated negative declaration prepared in compliance with CEQA, and to make the appropriate findings.
Supervisor Kim.
Thank you. This item before us today, which I am a co-sponsor of, is a result of a truly collaborative process over the past 2 years between community stakeholders, community-based organizations, and the project sponsor of this site. I'm really proud to have an ordinance that is coming before us, where a development project will be working to achieve 25% on-site affordable housing. And unfortunately, due to an oversight, including a last-minute agreement between the planning department and the project sponsor, this portion of the agreement was not memorialized in the ordinance that is before us today. And so I would like to make a motion to clean that up and to make a motion to amend to item 23 in lines 22 and 23, the additional line that 3.5% of the units affordable to households earning 150% of average median income for the purposes of renting an affordable unit. Previous to this addition, the project sponsor had already committed 23% affordable housing to the community, 40 units at 55% of EMI, 4% at 70, 4% at 90. Planning Commission had requested, and the project sponsor agreed to an additional 3.5% at 150% of average median income. And this would just memorialize this within the general plan amendment that is before us today. We've been informed by the city attorney that this unfortunately requires the planning code amendment to go back to land use. And so my only request is that we could hear it at land use next week and forward it as a committee report back to the Board of Supervisors next Tuesday, so that the project sponsor can move forward with this development before the end of the year. However, unless I stand to be corrected by the city attorney, we can move forward and vote on item 25. Because I am not making amendments to item 25, I felt uncomfortable forwarding both back to the Land Use Committee. Okay. So, colleagues, I'm going to make a motion to amend item 23 as I just articulated, and then this item will be sent back to the Land Use and Transportation Committee. And, colleagues, I do ask for your support for item 25 today.
So just to be clear, Supervisor Kim has made a motion to amend and send item number 23 to the Land Use Committee on December 12, 2016, seconded by Supervisor Tang. Colleagues, can we take this without objection? Without objection, this item will be amended and sent to Land Use on December 12, 2016. And on item number 25, colleagues, can we take that item, same house, same call, Without objection, the ordinance is passed unanimously on the first reading. Please read item 24.
Item 24 is an ordinance to amend the planning code to revise sectional map HT08 of the zoning map to rezone the height and bulk designation for 1493 through 1497 Potrero Avenue, assessors parcel block numbers 4277, lot number 016, from open space OS to 40X, to affirm the planning department's CEQA determination and to make the appropriate findings.
Colleagues, can we take this item, same house, same call? Without objection, the ordinance passes unanimously on the first reading. All right. Let's go to item number 26.
Item 26 is a resolution to approve the jurisdictional transfer of 1801 Gerald Avenue, assessors parcel block numbers 5281, lot number 001, commonly known as the asphalt plant site, currently under the jurisdiction of Public Works, to the San Francisco Public Utilities Commission, and a portion of 160 Napoleon Street, commonly known as the Napoleon site, currently under the jurisdiction of the SFPUC, to the SFP Public Works, subject to the terms and conditions of a memorandum of understanding between the PUC and Public Works, and to adopt the appropriate findings.
Colleagues, can we take this item, same house, same call? Without objection, the resolution is adopted unanimously. All right, Madam Clerk, let's go to our 3 p.m. special orders.
Items 27 through 30 comprise the special order at 3 p.m. for a public hearing of persons interested in the Public Works decision approving a tentative map for 3 units of new construction at 162 through 164 Alhambra Street, dated October 18th, 2016. Items 28 and 29 are the motions associated with approving or disapproving the tentative map, and item 30 is a motion to direct the preparation of findings.
Supervisor Farrell?
Thank you, Madam President. Colleagues, we are attempting to solve this outside of the board chambers. So with all the parties being supportive, I'd like to motion to continue these items to our February 28th, 2017 board meeting and hold the hearing open.
May I suggest that the motion also indicate you're keeping the matter open?
Thank you. Yes, I included at the end there, but wasn't particularly clear enough. So motion to keep the matter open and continue it until February 28th.
February 20th is a Monday.
28th, I believe.
28th, okay. So Supervisor Farrell has made a motion to continue this item to the meeting of February 28, 2016, seconded by...
17, Madam President, 2017.
Sorry, thank you.
Sorry.
February 28th, 2017, seconded by Supervisor Tang. And with that, I'd like to open it up for public comment, specifically to only speak on the continuance.
I support the continuance from Marina Calhalla Neighbors and Merchants, and we were never notified of this issue. And I would like to double check. Some people are appealing it. I'd like to be included in the process with Supervisor Farrell, and I'd also like to take a kind of gander of the neighbors just on my own. Thank you very much. I could support the continuance. I'm horrified that we were not informed. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other members of the public who'd like to specifically speak of the continuance? Seeing none, public comment is closed. And colleagues, Madam Clerk, on the item to continue, colleagues, can we take that same house, same call? Without objection, these items will be continued to the meeting of February 28, 2017. All right, Madam Clerk, our next 3 p.m. special order.
Items 31 through 34 and items 35 through 38, Madam President.
Yes.
These items comprise the special order at 3 p.m. for a hearing of persons interested in the or objecting to the determination of exemption from environmental review under the California Environmental Quality Act, issued as a categorical exemption by the Planning Department on September 27th, 2016, and approved by the Planning Commission on September 29th, 2016, for a proposed project located at 203 Cotter Street. And the second 3 p.m., as I mentioned, 35 through 38, for individuals interested in the certification of a conditional use authorization pursuant to Planning Code Section 209.1 and 303 for a proposed project located at 203 Cotter Street, and the items, the motions that are associated with approving, disapproving those items.
Thank you, colleagues. It's my understanding that the appellants have withdrawn both of the appeals relating to 203 Cotter Street. Supervisor Avalos.
Thank you, President Breed. So, colleagues, these items, yes, the appellants have withdrawn their appeals, the exemption from environmental review, as well as the conditional use appeals. I did want to talk about this project, though. It's actually been very interesting. The neighborhood in the Mission Terrace neighborhood that has experienced flooding, that has actually created a lot of frustration and stress in the neighborhood, especially on Cotter Street. We've had flooding in 2004 and in 2014 that resulted in the homes, garages, in-law rooms of houses being inundated, lots of damage, and the residents along Cayuga and Cotter are actually involved in a lawsuit with the city. And they look at this project at 203 Cotter Street, which is across the street from many of their homes, as something that could exacerbate some of the flooding issues. And some of the concerns that were raised for this hearing were really addressing hydrology. Currently at that site, 203 Cotter, it's open space. It's been open space for a number of years, probably forever, never really been developed. It's kind of a space, an alleyway or green space in between houses. In the past 8 or so years, there have been multiple property owners. The last one that sold, I think, was looking at building condominiums there and decided not to. In 2010, 2011, there's a farm called Little City Gardens that's been growing there and selling their produce to restaurants in the area. They're actually a commercial venture, been making money, but it's really low-key, really tied to land. The current farmer there, Caitlin Galloway, has been doing a lot of great work. We had legislation that was allowing this to be a land use site back in 2011 that President Chu and Supervisor Marr worked on with the mayor. And the loss of the farm is actually very real. Now, this project at 203 Cotter is going to be building a school, and it's a big loss to the neighborhood that actually grew to really appreciate this farm operation. It's a very small one. Everything was done by hand, and Caitlin Galloway has a real connection to the land based on all of her, labor and her work with her hands. She built a shed there with a lot of found material and has been growing really wonderful things there. But the new property owner is building a school. They own the land, and they're going to be moving forward. Their design for the school is actually something that is really tremendous. It's not like anything we see in District 11. It's a design and architecture that's going to be really looking at the green space and adding, building, but also a building that will be absorbing a lot of moisture into the groundwater, and I really think that's an exceptional thing. It also looks incredible, like something that you would see generally in other parts of San Francisco, not what you'd see in District 11. So I'm actually excited to see that this can go forward. And the last remaining piece is, how do we get the school and the neighborhood to work together and to see each other as neighbors and have a relationship that's long-lasting and fruitful. And I think the discussions that started last week are leading in that direction. And of course, the appellant's dropping the appeal is based on the understanding that they're going to go forward as neighbors. So I'm really excited to see that the project is now moving out of the controversial stage and into something that is going to be embraced by the community with a lot of work of, building that relationship. So these items now, I guess we won't be having a hearing. We had to have public comment. Is that correct?
Yes.
So I'm okay. We can start public comment.
Well, I would entertain a motion to table the items since they've been withdrawn.
I expect to do that, but do we want to do that after hearing from public comment?
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'll open this item up to public comment if there are any members of the public who... Oh, I'm sorry, Supervisor Cohen?
Thank you. Supervisor Avalos, I'd love to know what you whispered into the folks, the appellant's ear. I know I met with the appellants, and they mentioned to me that they had a meeting with you, and I think Supervisor-elect Safai, is that correct?
Yes, he is our supervisor-elect for District 11.
No, but there was a meeting.
There was a meeting at the planning department with John Ram last week.
I'm sorry. Maybe I have bad information.
Yeah, no, we
I
had a
thought you were
meeting,
there.
and there was nothing that was really whispered. But I didn't say anything to anyone that no one else heard. And essentially what I said is, going forward, it makes sense that everyone here is going to be neighbors. So how can we best be neighbors and share information about, what the, community around the school would like to see the school to do, and can the school agree to, meet them halfway? And they seem to be going in that direction. And so that there was a discussion at the meeting with John Ram saying, if we agree to do these things, we'll drop, the appellants, that they'll drop their appeal. So one of the discussions was that they would share information about the hydrology report and get that settled about what makes the most sense for that. They also wanted to discuss if there's possibilities of moving the school back, providing more space in between the houses to the west of the school, or to the east of the school and the school building itself. So they'll be talking about that, some type of design changes. And there's also discussion about how to do the enforcement around the transportation, or the cars that could be lining up, what's going to be in place to mitigate cars causing traffic. So they're talking about having like a walking school bus stop, and what other ways that they might be able to set up people walking the last 100 or so yards to the school. And so those are discussions that are going to continue, and people agreed that was left to still discuss, but there was interest in doing that. And I felt there was interest in people wanting to become better neighbors.
Well, I was under the impression that you were kind of the leader and kind of spearheading this. Granted, it was your district, and I just wanted to compliment you because I met with the appellant, and they had some real serious concerns. And now to receive this news that all the parties are interested in being good neighbors, the hydraulic study. I mean, these are very interesting, fine points that did not come out in my meeting with the appellant, but obviously was enough to bring about neighborhood peace. And so my compliments to you, and good job.
Thank you. I mean, I think with the neighbors were willing to kind of work things out together, and John Ram helped. He was actually in my office earlier in the last week, to help with this.
Okay. Well, good job to John Ram, and also to all the parties involved.
Thank you.
Thank you, colleagues. And let me remind you that you should maintain any level of a conversation through the president. Thank you. And with that, I will open this item up to public comment. Are there any members of the public who'd like to speak on this particular item at this time? Seeing none, public comment is now closed, and this hearing has been held. And it is my understanding that we will still need to go through this particular process. So Supervisor Avalos, would you like to do the honors?
Yes, I would. Thank you very much. And so would like to motion that we file items 31 and 35. Those are the hearings. Okay. And we approve items 32 and 36, which are the affirmation of the planning department's determinations. And we table items 33, 34, and 37, 38.
Okay, Supervisor Avalos has made a motion. Is there a second? Seconded by Supervisor Tang. Colleagues, can we take that without objection? Without objection, that passes unanimously.
So
Supervisor Avalos.
Just wanted to say, in all my 8 years on the Board of Supervisors, not quite 8 years yet, this is the second time that projects from District 11 have had, appeals. And it's just remarkable because there's been so many of these that have come through, but there's not a lot of development that happens in my district. Happens a lot of other places in the city. And so I'm glad I got another one in before I left office.
Very nice, and congratulations on your ability to get this one done in this fashion. All right, Madam Clerk, let's go to our committee reports.
Item 39 was considered by the Budget and Finance Committee at a special meeting on Monday, December 5th, and was forwarded as a committee report. It's recommended as amended with the same title. Item 39 is an ordinance to approve and authorize the Executive Director of the Port of San Francisco to execute a project partnership agreement with the United States Army Corps of Engineers to allow federal dredging of the Central Basin adjacent to Pier 70, conditioned upon the port providing a matching share from the port not to exceed approximately $3.1 million, to exempt the agreement from certain requirements of the Environment and Administrative Codes, and to affirm the Planning Department's CEQA determination.
Supervisor Tang.
Thank you. I did chair this special meeting on behalf of Supervisor Farrell, so just thought I'd let you know what we discussed. Essentially, this is a 30-year agreement that the port is going to have with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers to engage in dredging so that Pier 70 and the work that goes on there to repair ships can continue to go on. The last dredging, the full dredging that has occurred about 10 years ago, but under this agreement, they certainly hope to do that more regularly so that they don't have to turn more ships away, which would come at a cost of losing jobs and so forth. So I do recommend that the full board approve this agreement.
Thank you. Seeing no other names on the roster, colleagues, can we take this item? Same house, same call. Without objection, the ordinance will be passed unanimously on the first reading. Next item, please.
Items 40 through 44 were considered by the Government Audit and Oversight Committee at a regular meeting on Thursday, December 1st. Item 40 was recommended as amended with the same title. It's an ordinance to amend the Campaign and Governmental Conduct Code to update the Conflict of Interest Codes Form 700, filing requirements for the City, San Francisco Community College District, San Francisco Unified School District, and successor agency to the Redevelopment Agency by adding, deleting, and changing titles of designated officials and employees to reflect organizational and staffing changes, and by refining disclosure requirements for designated officials and employees.
Colleagues, can we take this item? Same house, same call. Without objection, the ordinance passes unanimously on the first reading. Next item, please.
Item 41 was recommended as a committee report. It's an ordinance to authorize final settlement of claim number 16-02314, filed by Ronald and Patricia Martell against the city for a total potential payment of approximately $5 million, and holding claimants harmless from third-party claims for a limited period.
Same house, same call. Without objection, the ordinance passes unanimously on the first reading. Next item, please.
Item 42 was also recommended as a committee report. It's an ordinance to authorize the Director of Property to agree to acquire and accept the State of California's relinquishment of all its right, title, and interest in and to the sidewalks along portions of Van Ness Avenue, portions of South Van Ness Avenue, and the underlying real property, except as otherwise accepted and reserved by the State of California.
Same house, same call. Without objection, the ordinance passes unanimously on the first reading. Next item.
Item 43, Madam President, was not forwarded to the board.
Okay, let's go to roll call for introductions. Who's up first?
Supervisor Peskin.
Thank you, Madam Clerk, Madam President, colleagues. As we learned earlier this year, in the last 40 years, San Francisco's low-cost residential hotels have dwindled from some 33,000 units to a little bit more than 19,000 units. This 14,000 unit loss of very low-income housing is almost twice our current homeless population. As neighborhoods like the Mission, Chinatown, North Beach, the Tenderloin, and Lower Nob Hill know, these units are truly the last remnants of permanently affordable housing stock left in the city. They not only serve as transitional housing for those exiting homelessness or low-income families struggling to get by, but they are far more often the last place that a single adult, particularly seniors on fixed incomes, can live in a city that has rapidly become more and more expensive and, some would say, a giant tech dorm. These units have traditionally housed our artists, our barkeeps, and hospitality industry workers, and our neighborhood characters. Whether through speculative warehousing of units, illegal Airbnb, or illegal conversions, we are losing this critical housing stock. Thank you for your approval earlier this year of a temporary moratorium on SRO conversions in the absence of definitive proof that those conversions would not adversely affect our affordable housing stock. After several months of work, and I particularly want to thank Sunny Angulo of my office, I'm introducing a legislative update to Chapter 41 of the Administrative Code. That was the law that governs hotel conversions that was approved by the Board of Supervisors in 1981. Our amendments would clarify what constitutes a permanent resident versus a transient tourist, as well as what constitutes true replacement housing for our seniors, disabled, and low-income residents in the case of conversions. It will give greater enforcement and monitoring tools to our Department of Building Inspection and update the in-lieu fees, administrative fines, and penalties to reflect today's cost recovery needs and the nexus with our housing program. This is legislation that was crafted to address the cannibalization of SRR housing stock into condos and later amended and is past due for a comprehensive update. I just want to make it clear that the kind of speculative warehousing of units that the city has been seeing over the last couple of decades is completely unacceptable. It is time for the city to protect our housing stock if we're going to truly address our housing crisis in San Francisco. And I also want to thank Rosemary Bosky and J.B. Samamatsu, as well as the tenant leaders, Mission SRO Collaborative, Unite Here Local 2, the Community Tenants Association, for their input and feedback over the last several months, as well as Supervisor Kim for her co-sponsorship. Housing preservation is a critical key to addressing our housing crisis, and I'm looking forward to your support. Secondly, I'm introducing a package of new ethics reforms that have been brewing for some time in the city, at least since the days and months leading up to Prop J in the year 2000. In the most recent November election, an astonishing 70% of San Francisco residents voted in favor of a constitutional amendment to overturn Citizens United. Nearly 90% of voters approved new local restrictions on campaign contributions by registered lobbyists. It was by far the most popular measure on the ballot and was built by a campaign that had a tiny fraction of the resources other ballot measure committees enjoyed. We know this. There's a huge appetite for campaign finance reform in San Francisco. We have a clear mandate to effect campaign finance reform, which extends to regulation of our own activity, and we have also anecdotally known that the influence leveraged by moneyed interests in City Hall is pervasive. The legislation I'm introducing today contains new disclosure requirements and prohibitions on activity, including bundling of campaign contributions, restrictions on our own activity as elected officials with respect to ballot measure committees, and on the contributions of entities and individuals with pending land use matters before the city. I'm proud of the work my office has done on this in the this past year, particularly around legislation banning candidate-controlled general purpose committees, moving forward new disclosure requirements for fundraising by members of city boards and commissions, and with developing the reforms that are in front of us. And I want to thank Lee Hepner of my staff for working on this. These are all incremental steps in the right direction. In the coming months, I hope to have the support of you, colleagues, for all of these measures, and in doing so, I hope also to engage in the conversations that we need around implementation and enforcement of these and our existing regulations. The rest I will submit.
Thank you, Supervisor Peskin. Supervisor Yee.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Today I'm introducing an ordinance to amend the Administrative Business and Tax Regulations Code to eliminate any outdated and unnecessary fees, to streamline the codes and make it easier for small business owners to navigate fees. After consulting the Controller's Office and working with the Police Department, Entertainment Commission, Department of Public Health, I've taken the recommendations and incorporated them into this legislation. Many of the fees are already set at $0 anyways, or are anachronistic or burdensome. Eliminating these fees would have minimal revenue impact. The purpose of this ordinance is to simplify the list of fees for small business owners and make it less burdensome to conform to our city's requirements. The rest I submit.
Thank you, Supervisor Yee. Supervisor Avalos.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. So, colleagues, related to the hearing we just had on 203 Cotter, it showed that we have some growing pains in District 11, the Mission Terrace neighborhood. And one of the painful outcomes that we have for this new project at 203 Cotter is that the Little City Gardens farm is no longer going to be there. And so I'm introducing a resolution that will call upon the Department of Real Estate to work with other departments like the Rec and Park Department, the Public Utilities Commission, to look into how we can create or set aside or reserve land for agriculture and commercial agriculture and education agriculture. We have models that are possible in the city and county of San Francisco to have an urban ag program, but we also don't really have land that's really readily available, nor do we have the conditions on how land is financed and how the public space is financed to be able to make such farms viable. So I want to look at to see if we can actually create, ask by resolution, our Department of Real Estate and work with other entities that are involved with our urban agricultural program to see how we can go about setting aside land that could be used for such purposes. So that's a resolution I'm introducing, and I'm hoping that one of the colleagues who will continue on or is new to the board will be able to work with that program, that idea. I'm also requesting that legislation be drafted. I'm asking the Comptroller's Office to create a supplemental appropriation about how we might be able to move money around to pay for our services that perhaps we'd like to cover that weren't approved by the ballot. So how are we going to cover our homelessness and transportation services? So I'm asking the Comptroller's Office to draft legislation based mostly on a budget analyst report that I had asked for. If we're trying to bring in funding for these services, where can we possibly get that money from in our budget? And so I've asked the budget analyst to give us some recommendations. I expect that whatever is going to be ultimately in this supplemental appropriation ordinance will be negotiated through, but it would be good to have a document that we can work off of, or the future board can work off of, to make those discussions and negotiations happen. Currently, what we see moving forward is a plan from the mayor's office that I'm not totally in agreement with. We also have a discussion about how we might move forward with universal access to representation, and there's not a full agreement about the process for that. So I'm hoping that this supplemental appropriation will give us the ability to make some changes on the spot that we can do as a legislative body with the mayor's office at some point in the new year. The rest I'll submit.
Thank you, Supervisor Avalos. President Breed.
Thank you. Colleagues, today I'd like to adjourn our meeting in memory of the 36 lives lost in the tragic ghost ship fire in Oakland on Friday, December 2nd. And I know that Supervisor Marr joins me in this effort. A letter from the Board of Supervisors will be sent to the Mayor of Oakland specifically for this particular in memoriam. Our Bay Area community was struck by this tremendous loss, and firefighters continue to search through the rubble and devastation left behind. It's my understanding that they are, I think, over 85% complete with their search. I want to offer our thanks to the dedicated men and women who responded to the scene, and I'd like to extend the condolences on behalf of the board to all the families and loved ones impacted by this tragedy. As a community that thrives on our commitment to the arts, music, and culture, we admire the resilience and are thankful for the love, joy, and magic many of these artists bring to our Bay Area community. May they, victims of this sad tragedy, rest in peace. And we are sending our heartfelt condolences to the families, especially at this time. And colleagues, I would like to do this on behalf of the entire board without objection. Without objection, we will send this on behalf of the entire board. And Madam Clerk, before we move to roll call for introductions, I wanted to give Supervisor Marr an opportunity to speak to this particular in memoriam.
Actually, thank you, President Breed. I wanted to also share my great sorrow and sadness in joining you and the board to end the meeting in the memory of not only the 36, but the youngest victim of the Oakland ghost ship fire, 17-year-old Draven McGill. a student at San Francisco's Ruth Asawa School of the Arts. Asawa Sota is how some of us refer to it. But also DJ Nact, who is also known as Johnny Igas, the music buyer for Green Apple Records and Books. He was also a graduate of Asawa Sota from 1999 and worked at Green Apple in my district, and many others who lost their lives on Friday night in the warehouse fire. I think the fire officials, as Supervisor Breed said, are referring to this as the worst structural fire in the history of California. And we're feeling the impacts, of course, here in San Francisco and Oakland and the Bay Area, but also throughout this country. But artists, Oakland City officials, and Oakland really hurting artists, DJs, and the EDM communities, art space communities really, really mourning the tragedy. Many of us has different degrees of separation from the tragedy, and I'll just say I have some really close connection to the fire, but I think the entire arts and creative communities feel a devastating loss of an amazing space and creativity that was in the space that burned that night. Last night at Oakland's Lake Merritt during the vigil, Congresswoman Barbara Lee read a great statement from President Obama that said America's lost young men and women with their whole futures ahead of them. San Francisco high school student and artist Draven McGill was the youngest among them. Congresswoman Lee also continued, today our prayers go out to the people of Oakland, California in the aftermath of this weekend's deadly fire, one of the worst fires in the state's history. While we still don't know the full tone of this disaster, we do know that an American community has been devastated. For me, my 1 degree of separation in this tragedy, it hits really close home to my daughter Jade and I through the reported death of Draven, 17-year-old, really talented singer, and the whole vocal department in San Francisco Ruth Asawa School of the Arts is mourning him with a wall of thanks for him from yesterday that Joe Fitzgerald Rodriguez, a SOTA grad as well from the Examiner, reported. But Draven was one of my daughter's best friends, and they had a whole group of friends that mourned together yesterday and last night. Draven frequently hung out at my house. He slept on our couch when he couldn't get to BART in time to get home to Dublin, where he lived. I'll really miss him, but I know his friends are really hurting right now. The healing process has been really hard for his family, and I wanted to thank Draven's dad, Phil McGill, for giving me permission to close this meeting in Draven's honor. I think I just want to express my deepest sorrow and condolences to Phil and Tammy and Draven's sisters Mila and Nina and their whole family. They are going to celebrate Draven's life in a memorial on Sunday in Hayward, and I wanted to at least let people know that the family is celebrating his life Sunday, December 11th at the Church of Jesus Christ, 2000 Highland Boulevard in Hayward. But also the Asawa Sota community on Saturday, December 10th at 7:30 is doing in remembrance through the vocal department and the orchestra. They'll be performing Brahms' Requiem to express the sorrow that people feel about Draven's passing. I have really good memories of this beautiful young man, Draven McGill. Our family visited Yosemite last year, and Draven and his family also were there, and we all climbed the waterfalls and to the sky, reaching up for beauty, creativity, and joy. That feeling is in me, and how I'll always remember Draven and never forget him. In the Asawa Sota wall of memorials, the students did a lot of thanking and remembering Draven. Some said, "Your infectious smile and constant positivity, thank you for that." Others said, "You wish me luck during our auditions. Some said, "I think of you when I sing." Others said he had a calming presence and a kind heart. One of Draven's best friends, Phelan, luckily escaped the fire that night. And from what Joe Fitzgerald Rodriguez writes, blinded by smoke and choking on the fumes, Phelan luckily jumped out of a window and then heard someone's voice to basically be saved. But Phelan and the World Music Department, of which he's a part, did a drum circle, and that helped with the healing as people expressed what they felt in mourning. Also, others at Asawa Soda sang Draven's favorite songs. And I know that he loved the band Radiohead, as I and my daughter do, and Tom York, the vocalist and composer and singer. And now whenever Jade and I will hear songs like No Surprises and York's crackling voice, we'll always remember Draven and his singing, laughing, and his dreams. Art heals, as Joe Fitzgerald Rodriguez said, and music heals. And I think it will help in this process. Draven was very talented performing with so many different choruses, but I know there was a special one, his a cappella trio that many of his colleagues from the vocal department performed into. And I wanted to also just say that to his close friends like Julian and Jade, student body president Gabe Bibliowicz, who was in the a cappella trio with him, to Phelan, Floyd, Virgil, Jesse, Driana, and the entire vocal department. We'll mourn for Draven, but never forget him. I wanted to thank the school districts and the Ruth Asawa counseling staff for supporting the students and providing the grieving space for classmates to mourn. Lastly, I wanted to thank Berkeley Mayor Tom Bates for raising the issue of the need for safe art spaces and an affordable place for people to live, especially artists in our communities. Burning Man organization issued a great statement that said, "It's a time that calls for compassion, community support, and learning. We can work collaboratively to inform and educate in an effort to prevent these kinds of accidents in the future." They talk about safety protocols and fire response plans for creative spaces, and for city departments and policymakers and agencies to work together with community spaces, property owners, and venues, so that we don't drive cultural spaces out of existence, but rather seek to make safe and welcome places in our cities. Thank you, Madam President, for letting us close this meeting in honor of not only Draven McGill, but also many others. I also wanted to acknowledge, too, that another 1 degree of separation person, actually this person is 2 degrees of separation past. His name was Johnny Igas, a.k.a. DJ Nact, and he was the music buyer for Green Apple Books. And I wanted to thank Pete Mulhaville of the Green Apple family for acknowledging Johnny. And I wanted to thank Johnny's brother, Paul, for allowing me to urge us to close our meeting in honor of Paul Igas, DJ Nact. He had the dream job at Green Apple Books, being the music buyer. And though it's not confirmed that Johnny has died in the fire, his family fears that he is gone. So thank you to Paul Igas for letting me know about the memorials that may be organized soon, but I know many in the DJ community that work with Johnny will be honoring him in different ways. Johnny Igas was a Ruth Asawa School of the Arts graduate in 1999 when the school was on Font Street near San Francisco State. And his brother, Paul, is a graduate also of the Ruth Asawa School of the Arts in creative writing about 10 years ago, and was a colleague of Joe Fitzgerald Rodriguez's as well. I wanted to thank the whole Ruth Asawa School of the Arts community for creating a space of creativity, but also of mourning as people grieve with the passing of these creative artists from our communities. And thank you, President Breed, for letting me say these things and to speak from my heart at one of my last board meetings of the year of my 8-year term. So thank you very much. The rest I'll submit.
Thank you, Supervisor.
Supervisor Peskin, you wanted to comment as well?
Yeah, I just rise to speak to one of the 36 individuals, Jonathan Birnbaum, who's the most recent confirmed death in the Oakland fire. I've known his parents all my life, and my profound condolences to Ed and Diane and his brother.
Thank you, Supervisor Peskin. And as I wanted to say briefly that we will, again, adjourn the meeting in their honor on behalf of the entire board. And so with that, Madam Clerk, we will return to the order of roll call.
Supervisor Campos.
Thank you. And thank you, President Breed, for doing that on behalf of the entire board. I was actually briefly at the vigil, excuse me, that happened in the Castro yesterday, because this was also a place for many members of the transgender community. So as a member of the LGBTQ community, I know how devastating this has been for this community as well. You know, I started my term as a supervisor fighting efforts by then Mayor Newsom to weekend sanctuary in San Francisco. And sadly, I'm ending my term as a supervisor fighting efforts by Donald Trump to weekend sanctuary in San Francisco. I thought my last meeting of the Board of Supervisors and my term as a member of the Board of Supervisors would be next Tuesday. But it's clear that we can't end on that note. And so I'm doing an introduction today to call for a special emergency meeting of the Public Safety Neighborhood Services Committee that I'm a member of, and I want to thank the chair of that committee, Supervisor Kim, for consideration of this special meeting. As you know, working with a broad coalition of community members and the public defender, I introduced a request last week for funding of legal services, for universal legal services and universal legal representation for immigrants. And I know that there is a debate that goes on right now. The Chronicle, in its editorial, said, you know, why do we need to act now? Essentially, why don't we just wait and see? Actually, Assemblymember David Chu said, you know, we don't really know what Donald Trump is going to do, so let's not make any premature moves. He was quoted saying that in the Chronicle. Respectfully, we don't believe, those of us who are working in the immigrant community, that it's possible to say that we don't know what Donald Trump is going to do. We know what he's going to do. He already said what he's going to do. And he specifically said that he's going to deport 3 million people in his first 100 days. His chief advisor in the area of immigration is Kansas Secretary of State Chris Kobach, who was the architect of Arizona's AB 1070, as racist a law as we have seen in the history of this country. That law specifically said that law enforcement had to ask people for their papers and allowed officers in that state to ask anyone without a warrant to show their documentation if the officer believed that the person could have committed an offense that led to deportation. Could have committed an offense that led to deportation. In other words, if the person looked like they were undocumented, and it's not entirely clear what objectively an undocumented person looks like, but we know what they meant, right? if the person looked like me, if the person looked like Supervisor Avalos. Now, where we are a week after this proposal was introduced is that we are in a bind. The mayor has essentially said, actually not the mayor directly, but his staff, that they're not in a position to support something that has the public defender today. And the president of the board has said in the press that she's not going to waive the 30-day rule unless the mayor and my office and Jeff Adachi and the community work something out. The problem is that for those of us who put together this proposal, what the mayor means when he says, or what they're saying, work something out, is that we drop the public defender from the proposal. The problem is that we cannot, in our view, in good conscience, agree to drop the public defender because the public defender and the expertise they bring to these cases goes to the heart of what it means to provide legal representation. Someone described it this way. It's like, we'll give you a doctor, but if you need a surgeon, we're not going to give you that surgeon. And so, if the only way that this is going to be heard is for the president to waive the 30-day rule is if we work something out with the mayor, but if the mayor's staff is saying the only way we're going to work something out is to drop the public defender, what it means is that this proposal might as well be dead in the water. Because the president said she's not going to waive that 30-day rule unless we work something out, and we're not going to work something out if it means taking out the public defender. Sadly, as we are doing this in San Francisco, Santa Clara, by the way, just became the first jurisdiction in the Bay Area, in the region, to unanimously vote, the Board of Supervisors in Santa Clara, to move forward with their efforts to fund universal representation. So kudos, Santa Clara. Kudos, Santa Clara. Excuse me? Well, I'm not sure exactly what it looks like. So what I'm asking is, given that this proposal won't be heard this year, given that the mayor won't budge and the president won't waive the 30-day rule, I am asking for a special meeting next week so that we can hear from the relevant agencies, all of the agencies, and I don't want to leave any out, but certainly we want to hear from law enforcement, we want to hear from public health, we want to hear from education, from all the relevant agencies, what they plan to do to protect the rights of the 44,000 undocumented people that live in San Francisco in light of the fact that this proposal will not be heard. I have nothing to say right now to the people in my district and in this city who are asking me, what are we going to do in San Francisco? I don't have anything to say because I thought that what I was going to say was, well, we are taking care of it. We stood in the rotunda of City Hall and said that we're a sanctuary. Turns out that it's a lot easier to say that than to actually move something forward. I think we owe it to them to say what we're going to do, given that this proposal is not moving forward this year. Supervisor Marr, I hear you about the need to hear something before we're termed out. The sad thing is that on the issue of immigration, it's not just a personal preference. For so many people, it's an issue of reality and survival for them. So I think we owe it to these people that we have made the promise that we're going to be a sanctuary, even though we're not acting on this proposal, to tell them what we're going to do to protect them in light of the fact that we are not willing to act this year. The rest I submit.
Thank you, Supervisor Campos. Supervisor Cohen.
Thank you. So, colleagues, today I'm introducing a resolution affirming this body's support for the use of force policy unanimously agreed upon by the San Francisco Police Commission and urging the San Francisco Police Officers Association to implement the Police Commission's use of force policy. Now, this policy is before the Police Commission tomorrow evening, where action will most likely be taken. This action could be a vote by the Commission reaffirming their commitment to this policy. Alternatively, the Commission could shift their position and move the prohibition on shooting at moving vehicles. The Police Commission's agenda was not published until Friday afternoon, which is why I'm introducing this imperative agenda item today. It's critical that the Board of Supervisors take a public position and affirm support on this issue today, before the Police Commission votes on the issue tomorrow, as it has a direct impact on the public safety of San Franciscans. The use of force policy is supported in full by the mayor, by the Police Commission, and the United States Department of Justice. And as you may recall, the U.S. DOJ was invited by Mayor Lee on January 21st of this year to intervene and review, among other things, the use of force strategies of the San Francisco Police Department. Now, despite more than 5 months of negotiations, the work between the San Francisco Police Commission and the POA has come to an impasse, and the SFPOA is using the prohibition against shooting at moving vehicles as recommended by the Police Commission and the DOJ as the reason for not moving forward. On December 1st in 2016, the POA released an egregiously misleading video emphasizing their emphasizing their opposition to recommendations from policing experts. And these policing experts include the Police Commission, the U.S. DOJ, President Obama's Task Force on 21st Century Policing, who uniformly agree that shooting at moving vehicles is ineffective and flat out dangerous for the shooter, for the target, and for bystanders. The POA's campaign is not unlike the disorienting counterfact campaign style of President-elect Donald Trump. In fact, they are using fear-mongering tactics to mislead the public, distort the truth, and to omit facts. My assertion is that we are borrowing strategy from the President-elect to support that we are borrowing a strategy from the President-elect is supported by the fact that the SFPOA PAC contributed at least $5,000 to the RNC during the 2016 election season. Now, given the impending changes to the federal government, we are in a critical moment when we must stand fearlessly in the face of falsehoods and propaganda when it comes to defending our identity as a city. In this case, we're not asking for anything outrageous. As a matter of fact, we're asking for a thoughtful restraint, and we will continue to push the POA as well as PD to continue moving forward in building mutual trust, building transparency, and most importantly, building accountability. There's no reason or objective argument to rationalize the need to shoot at targets moving in vehicles. It's a time for the POA to evolve and to, frankly, update their antiquated policies to ensure the safety of our city and uphold the logical and ethical reasoning of our city's leaders. I want to thank President Breed, Supervisors Kim, Avalos, Peskin, and Marr for the co-sponsorship of this resolution. I have copies of this language that I'd like to submit to you, and particularly I would like to just highlight there is a section on page 2 that is on line 6 where it says, whereas the same prohibition has been adopted successfully by large metropolitan police departments, including New Orleans, Las Vegas, Philadelphia, Washington, D.C., Metropolitan Police Department, and also this recommendation has been accepted by the International Association of Chiefs of Police. I would also like to add a, here's amended language. And I also would like to add Supervisor Campos. Thank you. I've been asked to include an additional whereas clause that I'm going to have to read into the record. Whereas the SFPOA and the Police Commission still have disagreements about the use of force policy, that we encourage them to work and resolve. And that whereas can be placed. Sure, I did. And I'll talk about, actually, I'll talk about the rest at the imperative item in the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Cohen. Supervisor Farrell. Okay. Supervisor Kim.
Submit.
Okay. Supervisor Marr.
Thank you. Colleagues, I have a couple of announcements. The Richmond District, my neighborhood, is going through a visioning process. We're calling it the Richmond District Strategy. We're trying to provide a comprehensive understanding of the history, present, and the future of our neighborhood, the trends, needs, and opportunities in order to ensure a sustainable and affordable future for our district. I think the ongoing displacement and affordability crisis, the fears of small business displacement and artist displacement are some of the critical issues that are before us. Whether you're a current resident or a business owner or people that just care about the future and the soul of the Richmond District, we want you to come help us envision a better Richmond. Your participation is critical, especially tenants, seniors, immigrants, low-income people, people of color, families with children. We really encourage you to participate. We did surveying that, of course, doesn't reach as broad a diversity as we want, so we really need more input from those specific targeted groups. I want to thank, in our process, 2-year process, and that will continue into Sandy Fewer's leadership of the Richmond District, but I wanted to thank from the Planning Commission staff, Sue Exline, Kimia Hadadin, for their great work in helping us envision a better Richmond, but also Joseph Smook and Cynthia Fong from the Housing Rights Committee, our tenant and community center for the Richmond District, for their process to empower our residents as we envision a better Richmond. Also, one of the most fun times on Clement Street in the Richmond District, we call it Clement Time. It's our holiday stroll, but I think a key hook is we'll see snow on Clement Street this coming holiday season, and it's coming up on Thursday, December 8th, this Thursday, from 5:30 to 9. You could see all the different merchants on ClementStreetSF.com. That's our Clement Street merchants, our 90-some-odd-year-old merchants association. It's organized by them. Bring the family and shop local, shop independent this holiday season. It'll be on Clement Street between Arguello all the way to Thidwick Books on 12th Avenue, where one of our residents, homeless and cheerful man, Myron Hooker, stayed until he passed away recently. So Clement all the way to 12th Avenue. This shop local and independent effort among our Richmond District businesses is a kickoff event, and we remind neighbors to support our independent and locally owned businesses, especially during this holiday season. We'll also be singing and caroling from the Senior Center. Snow will be at the store called Tantrum, which is right on 4th Avenue. It's a circus-themed store that's also in Coal Valley, but they will have snow, and I can't wait to see it. Also, there's a huge map of all the participating businesses that will be on the windows of bus vans. And thank you so much to Michael Busk for his leadership of the Clement Merchants and our president, Cynthia Huey, and all of the great merchants. Please support us. Come check out the snow on Clement Street and support small independent businesses and shop local this holiday season. Thank you. The rest I'll submit.
Thank you, Supervisor Marr. And Madam President, seeing no other names on the roster, that concludes the introduction of new business.
Okay, Madam Clerk, can you please read public comment?
At this time, the public may now address the entire Board of Supervisors for up to 2 minutes on items within the subject matter jurisdiction of the Board, to include the minutes and items on the without reference to committee calendar, items 46 through 50. Public comment is not allowed when an item has already previously been subject to public comment at a board committee. Pursuant to the board's rules, please direct your remarks to the board as a whole, not to individual supervisors and nor to the audience. Speakers using translation assistance will be allowed twice the amount of time to testify, and if you would like to display your document on the overhead projector, please clearly state such to SFG TV and have the document and remove the document when the screen should return to live coverage of the meeting.
Thank you. First speaker.
أيها الإخوة العرب الموجودين معنا هنا في سان فرانسيسكو وأوكلاند وبي إيريا وضواحيها. اسمي عبد الله مجاهد وأنا أمريكي من أصل مصري عربي ومصري. وبالحقيقة أنا هنا اليوم لأطلب منكم يد المساعدة الممكنة للوقوف بجانب أهل الضحايا الذين فقدوا أرواحهم في المخزن الملعون وفي الحريق الذي لا يرحم. 36 رجل وامرأة ماتوا نتيجة عدم وجود سكن معقول، فاضطروا أنهم يسكنوا في مخزن. جريمة تمت تحت ستار الاستغلال وعدم احترام القوانين. عموما التحقيقات سوف تثبت الكثير في المستقبل. وأنا اليوم بتمنى من العرب أصحاب التجارات وأصحاب المحلات أنهم يتبرعوا، سواء كان تبرع مادي أو أكل أو حتى مية للشرب العطشانين. وأنا بعرف أن كتير منكم أصحاب المحلات التجارية سوف يقدموا الواجب وزيادة شوية. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. My name, as you know, Abdullah Mujahid, and I am here today to give my sympathy on behalf of every one of you to the family who lost their own one they love. In Oakland, warehouse fire. I am here to thank you to the mayor of Oakland, the chief bullet fire, that everyone work day and night to help as they can. Ladies and gentlemen, let me ask our supervisor, Jean Kim. We have problem, but we can't see the problem very close. I am going to show you something else very simple to let you know that the problem we have is very close to handle it. Look here for the picture, I put it now. You don't see it. Yeah, that picture for empty house number 68 12th Street. Many years this house is empty. Why you don't support Jean Kim to let us give that place for the house, for the people lost their own family in Oakland, at least temporarily for the time we have now. I am sorry for them. I am sorry for everyone lost his life in this time. Year 2016 refused to go to before to give us two problems. The big problem, Donald Trump. The second problem.
Thank you, Abdullah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker,
I hope
please.
to help us.
Patricia Voy, Marina Calhoun Neighbors in Action, Planning Associations of Divisadero. We had someone else who died last Friday. For 10 years, I've asked the MTA, the Parking and Traffic Department, and the Police Department to change the time lights on Lombard Street. They didn't. We asked for red light cameras. They didn't. We had red light cameras, and they gave them to 19th and Holloway. A 45-year-old man was killed based on the fact that someone ran a red light, and if they had have had the 12-second delay that we had requested, this man would not have been dead. I want us to honor Mr. Lowenstein, 45 years old, 3 children, 3 daughters, many stories similar to what the happened in Oakland, but this was a horrifying accident. This is a man from Tiburon that patronized our neighborhood and patronized San Francisco. I'd like you guys to give a moment of peace concerning this young man, 45 years old. My point is that someone is going to have to start doing something for line item veto and to get control over the SFMTA. They were informed ad nauseum about this issue, and nothing has been done. We have now gone through 3 or 4 supervisors with this issue, and nothing's being done. I expect something to be done. And if not, can any of the rest of you do it? Thank you very much. Let's take the next 14 seconds in honor of Mr. Lowenstein. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments. Next speaker, please. Step up, sir.
I thought we were going to take 14 seconds.
Are you beginning your comments now, sir?
Okay.
Okay, here we go.
I, was mistaken, obviously. Day 7,560, came and went. And I was preaching the Bible at Stanford University on that day and trying to talk to a couple people about the genius of Christianity and how, if I was to say, well, let's just say, today, Michael Aquino is going to die eating a cheeseburger at a McDonald's in San Francisco. I didn't specify, what McDonald's. I did specify what? The city, San Francisco, the item he would be chewing on, a cheeseburger, the restaurant he would be at, a McDonald's, and that he would die, and that he would die today, and that this prophecy was given the same day by the same author, namely me, and I'm not a prophet, but the point is, when we Christians try to explain to you, heathen, the genius of Christianity, it is found in prophecy. And the authors had no idea who the other guys were. Isaiah never knew Daniel, okay? Daniel never knew Moses. Moses never knew Zechariah, and so on. Yet all of these prophets gave distinct prophecies in regards to the crucifixion, what would happen. Even the very words that they would say to him were written down by David 1,000 years before it took place. Now, the Lord is coming back. I was wrong, but hey, the Sabbath year has always ended for 3,500 years in the spring, so I'm shooting for the spring, and I'm hoping Christ will come back at the end of the Sabbath year in the spring. God is doing amazing things. I think about Roger Stone's book, Jeb and the Bush Crime Family. 11 days after it was published, Jeb stepped down. There's a reason for that. Alex Jones interviewed David Icke, who spoke with Kathy O'Brien several times, and talked about her poor daughter Kelly, and Herbert Walker Bush on Judgment Day, the Lord Jesus Christ. I'm telling you, everybody who's unsaved.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon, Supervisors. I'm Peter Warfield, Executive Director of Library Users Association. We recently, the city and the public, had a very big victory at least for the moment, on November 15th. And that was the day that the SFMTA Board of Directors met and rejected the SFMTA's plan to reroute the 19 Polk Street bus, the 19 Polk northbound, to completely bypass the 3 stops closest to the library. The one in front of the Orpheum at Market and Hyde, the one on Larkin at Grove, and the one in front of the Asian Art Museum at Larkin, on Larkin at McAllister. Their so-called 7th and 8th Street safety plan took no account of the fact that their new plan would force those people using that bus stop to walk 3 blocks and cross 2 big streets additionally, making a total between that stop and 2 other stops of 400,000 additional street crossings for pedestrians. And their whole plan appeared to be providing a likely measure of safety for bikers and possibly for cars and buses, entirely at the expense of pedestrians. I'd like to thank Supervisor Malia Cohen for sending a letter to the MTA objecting to the change of route. I'd like to thank City Librarian Luis Herrera for sending a letter, and the Chief of the Maine. My group, Library Users Association, did quite a bit of publicity to get people to come to meetings and to send letters as well about it. And I'd like to thank the SFMTA board, which apparently for once did the right thing, but only for now. They said in 3 months they want a report to find out alternative actions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Warfield. Next speaker, please.
Thank you, President Breed and all the cabal. First of all, I wanted to thank Member Avalos for his recent attempts to reduce San Francisco's carbon upload by changing the usage of our land in Kern County. I do appreciate that. Unfortunately, I would have to characterize that as tragically pathetic. I'm sorry, given the efforts, the strength of the world economy and the lack of time that we're investing in it. Member Kim wants to pour $5 billion into San Francisco Bay, building homes on Treasure Island, which will be underwater by the time the bonds mature. Not good thinking. I wanted also to note that former member Bevan Dufty is now complaining that ridership on BART to SFO is down. Something has to be done. Well, people are doing things about it. Uber and Lyft are currently taking all your time away, all your ridership away. Soon we will have automatic self-driving cars, which will relieve BART entirely of its burden. Finally, I wanted to note that members Peskin and Farrell were bickering over how to divide up the corpse of hardwired, hard-cabled computer access. And I'd like to welcome you to Facebook from my phone. This is a better technological solution for everybody. So you both have to disappoint your corporate sponsors. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon, Supervisors. I'm Caitlin Galloway. I'm here to comment on Supervisor Avalos's resolution from earlier regarding urban agriculture in San Francisco. I want to thank Supervisor Avalos for introducing this and thank the rest of the board for considering this in the coming weeks. I'm the co-founder of Little City Gardens that Supervisor spoke of. It's a 3/4 acre farm since 2010 at 203 Cotter in the Mission Terrace neighborhood. It's a long, narrow former creek bed in District 11. We've operated a working farm, growing and selling produce to neighbors, restaurants, and local markets, and we've offered unique space for education and awareness for city residents around not only how food is grown, so not only how a carrot comes out of the ground, but also how farm systems are maintained. It's sort of a unique knowledge set for city residents. We've hosted aspiring farmers and hundreds of interested city residents, and we've demonstrated what it takes to operate a functional, production-intensive working farm. We all know our food system is gravely out of balance. We need farms, we need farmers, and I think allowing for this kind of activity and education within a city context is really crucial. As you heard earlier, the property we've been farming, a privately owned parcel with a unique physical shape, it's sat vacant for decades, has now recently been approved for development, and we at Little City Gardens are sadly packing up our operation of 7 years and saying goodbye to our neighbors. On behalf of the urban ag community, I can say that one of the most concrete conclusions we've come to, both here in San Francisco and alongside fellow farmers nationwide, is that land access and secure tenure are crucial components to the strength and sustainability of our local urban ag movement, a movement that's gained momentum thanks to you over the past few years. Currently, farming is a land use that's largely temporary, novel. In order to have it be more permanent, I think we need parcels set aside. We need to think creatively about how to make farming a longer-term, more permanent fixture in our city. So thank you again. I look forward to...
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. Next speaker, please.
Hi, my name is Alan Martinez. I think just as it's unwise to take a wait-and-see attitude on immigration, I think it's crazy to take a wait-and-see attitude on health care. I mean, I've been following the news just as you all have, and the Republicans have promised to repeal ACA as their first item of business, which could include repealing the individual mandate. As a New York Times article pointed out, no matter what reassuring things that the Republican leadership may be saying, the insurance companies have their own agenda and will do what's good for them sooner rather than later, which could introduce chaos into the healthcare system. The New York, a similar news article stated that the state of California gets $20 billion from the federal government for health care. I don't know if that's just ACA or ACA and Medicare, but that's a lot of money. It quoted Kevin DeLeon saying something about that's a lot of money to raise and it would have to be taxes. Considering the number of people living with HIV and other life-threatening illnesses in San Francisco, I think it behooves the city of San Francisco to be talking immediately to state representatives to figure out a plan. Right now, ADAP is not managed by Healthy San Francisco. It's managed by a private company contracted with the state. I think it's AJ Boggs. People like me, I take 4 HIV medications. I had a 0 T-cell count for 15 years, constantly sick, and I didn't get well until I was taking 5 medications. I can't afford 5 medications. I can't miss a dose. I can't survive with missing health care for a month. So I think it behooves the city to get an emergency plan in place to take over the ADAP roles if the state can't do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Martinez. Next speaker, please.
Hi there, Madam President and the board at large. Thank you for having me. I'm a constituent from District 6. My name is Quinn Riley, and I'm here today representing a new organization called Debug Politics, which is a community of tech workers and others who are attempting to bring tech a little bit more into the political conversation, to acknowledge the ways in which technology played a role in this election, and to try and fix some of those. My background is in politics, having worked in Sacramento and D.C., but now work in tech, and many of us from this community are mad as heck and ready to get to work. I want to thank Supervisor Farrell for actually agreeing to come to our next event. We are hosting hackathons. We are a bunch of techies, and this is how we do things. We get together for a couple of days, eat a lot of pizza, drink a lot of coffee, and try to come up with some solutions. And it starts on Friday. It goes through Sunday. This is our second one. We did one 2 weeks ago, just immediately after the election. We had almost 100 participants. 12 successful projects came out of that, including projects to combat fake news, to expose people to the other side of the political spectrum, and to help make people more willing and able to call their congressman. And some of them have gotten coverage from CBS News, from the Huffington Post, from TechCrunch already. So obviously those projects are our product, but the organization is here to stay for a while. We're trying to make this a real thing that helps to foster a better conversation between the political and activist community and technology more broadly. So I'm here to ask for your help in fostering that conversation, because we are humble hackathoners who recognize that we don't have the solutions yet. Otherwise, we would have already done them. And we need to open a conversation, a dialogue amongst those who are the constituency that we are hoping to serve. So I hope that you and leaders from the community will join us this weekend, Friday through Sunday at GitHub. Debugpolitics.com is how you can find out about us. And we would certainly enjoy any of your staff joining us now and hope to foster a better conversation going forward.
Thank you for your comments. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon, supervisors. My name is Rio Sharf. I work at the SRO Collaborative in the Tenderloin, a project of the Tenderloin Housing Clinic. I want to start by thanking Supervisor Marr for your profound words about the ghost ship fire in Oakland. I think it's a reminder how intimate the Bay Area is, just how deeply that tragedy has penetrated into all of our communities, so thank you. But what I'm here to talk about today is the hotel conversion ordinance. Even the best laws need updates. And there's really no greater law in this city for low-income tenants than the hotel conversion ordinance, passed in 1980. This ordinance has allowed our city to save about 500 SRO buildings, which remain the last resort housing for a lot of low-income, elderly, and disabled tenants. So I want to thank Supervisor Peskin for a lot of hard work on updates to that ordinance, which haven't happened in about 20 years. So this law, which really prevents a lot of illegal tourist rentals from happening in SROs, which prevents demolitions and unlawful conversions, it needs a few updates, and Supervisor Peskin's office has been very attentive to the needs of SRO communities in articulating what kind of updates would be helpful, and in working with the Department of Building Inspection to figure out how best to help them enforce those laws. So just in recent weeks, we've actually seen some attempts to undermine this law's ability to preserve SROs. So this Thursday at the Planning Commission, SRO tenants from all over the city are going to be coming out to oppose a hotel conversion attempt by 6 SRO owners. They're trying to take advantage of the law and convert SRO units without actually replacing them with comparable units. We've also seen SRO owners unlawfully rent to tourists. They're renting for 7 nights at a time to tourists at residential buildings all throughout the city. And this update to the hotel conversion ordinance will help us prevent that from happening. So really hope you all will work with us to continue to strengthen the hotel conversion ordinance and to support Supervisor Peskin's law as it comes before you next month. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon, supervisors. My name is Gail Seagraves, and I am a tenant organizer with Central City SRO Collaborative, and I am here to say thank you to Supervisor Peskin for updating this hotel conversion law. It's very much needed. Just like what Rio just said, I echo all of that. And this is personal to me because I live in an SRO and I have been living in one for 8 years. So we don't need to be taking them away from people like me. We need to keep them and have more than we have right now. So thank you, Supervisor Peskin, and we hope this works out. Thank you.
Thank you, Gail.
Thank you for your comments. Next speaker, please.
I'm RJ Sloan, and I work with Central City SRO Collaborative. I live in District 6, and I also live in an SRO for 4.5 years. I like to ask the Board of Supervisors to do everything they can to strengthen and maintain the housing conversion ordinance, and I'll keep my comments short and sweet. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
So I want to exclude certain board members from this conversation that I'm about to have, and that would be Avalos, Campos, Marr, Peskin, and Kim. You, by definition, in my mind, do not fit the definition that I'm about to read. So a couple weeks ago, I said that you all were whores. And some people got mad at me for talking about people, especially women, as being whores. But the Merriam-Webster Dictionary defines a whore as a woman who engages in sexual acts for money. Or the second definition, a man who engages in sex acts for money. or the third definition, which is the working definition that I'm going to be using, a venal or unscrupulous person. Venal is defined as capable of being bought or obtained for money or other valuable considerations, originating in, characterized by, or associated with corrupt bribery. So it's that definition that I'm using when I call Breed, Cohen, Kathy, whores, and Farrell. Because how is it that, like, we know that the board is going to go moderate, or let's say corporate Democrat, or let's say more Trump-like, because you all are in the pocket of tech, which is overwhelmingly white, and I've been to hackathons. There was one black woman at the hackathon that I went to, and she was from Black Girls Code. But you all are, by definition, whores. You're corrupt, and you can be bought. And it's interesting that the Trump supporters that voted for Trump happened to be in Kathy's district, Mike Farrell's district, and actually Norman Lee's district. So it's a shame that you all are. Thank you.
Thank you. And just for future reference, sir, please keep your comments formal. Your critique is welcome here, but you will be addressing the board as a whole. Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Yes, I've been here before. Ronald Edward Johnson. I am going to be announcing I will be suing major departments within the city, San Francisco Police Department, namely in particular, as well as I'm going to be having an arrest warrant federally obtained for Ed Lee. So be very ready. There's a lot of corruption within the Care Not Cash. And so I'm going to be addressing that, as well as the police department, as they are stalkers and keep on harassing me through Care Not Cash and Community Housing Partnership. It's going to be very steep and heavy, very hefty, a lot of money. There's going to be a lot of change. I'm going to have every officer on the force, no matter what rank and level they are, going to jail in my lawsuit. So be very ready, because it's a lot. So thank you very much. Please remember, contact me as soon as you can.
Thank you for your comments. Next speaker, please. And before Mr. Gilberti begins, if there are any other members of the public who would like to address the board during general public comment, please step up.
Tom Gilberti, thank you. I'm a little sensitive to tragedy. I'm a little sensitive to the art world. That said, I'm trying to tie up loose ends. A long time ago, I mentioned Odie Webb, a man who was in World War II, captured by the Germans, spent time in a prisoner of war camp, got a letter from his wife saying you're divorced, and never expected to amount to much of anything. A man that I met in north central Missouri, a big man in my life. I mentioned my Uncle Willie, who got a metal plate in his head from the Battle of the Bulge, another great man in my life. And I have a certain revere for World War II, and I'm of that age. Now I would like to mention something that I consider great, I think we all consider great, and that would be, can we see it, this book? Ta-ta, Catch-22. Basically an anti-war story, but something that we've all learned and understand and use. Now I'd like the overhead, please. This is a construction site across the street from where I live, and a lot of little boys' toys for grown boys. Make a lot of noise. The Bureau of Building Inspection is not allowed to take a decibel reading, a noise reading at this site because they're not trained for it. The Department of Public Health is not allowed to take a decibel reading at this site by law, although they're trained to take the decibel reading. The police can take a decibel reading and can do nothing about it. Catch 22. The policeman did come and said it was 94 decibels, way above, but I can't do anything about it. Catch 22. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gilberti. Madam President, seeing no other speakers in line, I'll hand it back to you.
Thank you. Are there any other members of the public who'd like to provide public comment at this time? Seeing none, public comment is now closed. All right, Madam Clerk, please go to the items for adoption without reference to committee.
Items 46 through 50 are being considered for adoption without committee reference. A single roll call vote may enact these items. Otherwise, you may sever an item and have it considered separately.
All right, Supervisor Avalos? Okay, seeing no other names on the roster, Madam Clerk, on the remaining items, can you please call the roll?
On items 47 through 50, Supervisor Peskin.
Aye.
Peskin, aye. Supervisor Tang.
Aye.
Tang, aye. Supervisor Yee.
Aye.
Yee, aye. Supervisor Avalos.
Aye.
Avalos, aye. Supervisor Breed.
Aye.
Breed, aye. Supervisor Campos. Campos, aye. Supervisor Cohen. Cohen, aye. Supervisor Farrell. Farrell, aye. Supervisor Kim. Aye. Kim, aye. Supervisor Marr.
Aye.
Marr, aye. There are 10 ayes.
Okay, those items pass unanimously. Supervisor Tang?
I apologize. We included item 50 in that vote, correct?
Yes, we did.
Okay. I think maybe through the chair to the board clerk, I just wanted to make sure if that that motion includes the fact that we would have a Sunday meeting in January.
That is correct, Supervisor Tang, through the President. The charter requires a January 8th inaugural meeting. But there is a board rule that the board could waive that and move it to Monday the 9th.
So I'm wondering, I don't know if we could still have a discussion on it or if I should
Well,
rescind
why
the
don't we
motion.
rescind the vote and then have a discussion? So Supervisor Tang has made a motion to rescind the vote for item number 50, seconded by Supervisor Farrell. Colleagues, can we take that without objection? Without objection, the vote for item number 50 has been rescinded. Madam Clerk, please call item number 46.
Item 46 is a resolution to commend Chuck Nevius.
Supervisor Avalos.
Thank you. If there's anything worse than being talked about, it's not being talked about. And I will motion to have this sent to committee.
Okay, with a single request of a supervisor, it can be sent to committee. All right, Madam Clerk, let's go to item number 50.
Item 50 is a motion to establish the 2017 Board of Supervisors regular meeting schedule pursuant to the Board of Supervisors Rules of Order, sections 4.2 and 4.21, by canceling the board meetings of January 3rd, January 17th, February 21st, May 30th, July 4th, October 10th, and November 7th and 21st, 2017, and all board and committee meetings during the spring, summer, and winter breaks from March 27th through March 31st, July 31st through September 4th, and December 18th, 2017 through January 5th, 2018, and further suspending portions of Board Rule 4.2 to effectuate certain dates within the regular meeting schedule to augment the flow of business.
Okay, before I call on Supervisor Tang, I was of the understanding that the clerk sent out an email to members of the board expressing or asking for feedback on the calendar, but more importantly, specifically the inaugural meeting, because it was actually booked on the Sunday. So I know that I had given my feedback to the clerk, my suggestion, and that was that we stick to what the charter says. Of course, it is the prerogative of this body to make a decision to change it if you so fit. And with that, I will acknowledge Supervisor Tang.
Thank you. I just simply wanted to bring it up and make sure that we have a discussion here because I did hear about the lack of responses from members of the board. I did respond that I thought it was probably best to have a meeting on a weekday, but I am curious to hear other people's thoughts because I know that at least the odd district supervisors will be sworn in, so I certainly want to defer to all of them on the decision.
Okay, Supervisor Cohen?
Yeah, I was just going to defer to the odd number districts as well, but I would be against a weekend meeting. Thank you.
Okay. And Madam Clerk, would you like to specify or I can clarify what the options are and we can have a discussion, and if you all want to make a different decision, we can do that. Okay, so the clerk of the board had also mentioned that we could potentially do this meeting on Monday, or we could possibly have this particular inaugural meeting on Tuesday. What that would mean is definitely, because the term of the outgoing supervisors expire at noon, the new supervisors, potentially as well as the existing supervisors, will still need to be sworn in and can do so in a private ceremony so that they can begin their terms prior to an inaugural meeting. And the reason why my feedback was such that I thought I was fine with keeping it as is because it's stated in the charter, and I didn't want to necessarily deviate from that, but we still, I'm still open. I'm not necessarily stuck on a particular date. Madam Clerk, I'm not sure if we were able to reach out to the incoming members, because at the time of our discussion, we basically, the final votes weren't in for a certain district, and so can you provide us with feedback as to whether or not you had an opportunity to reach out to incoming members of the board?
Madam President, I have spoken with one incoming supervisor-elect. The other two, I had not had an opportunity to speak with them, although I did not hear from a majority of the board about the 8th. If you are interested in making an amendment that the inaugural happen on the 9th, my only request is that I'll at least be aware that there have been swearing-ins that have occurred, so that we'll be able to determine that there is not a vacancy in the district for the termed-out supervisors. Simply because termed-out supervisors do not hold over until the actual swearing-in meeting on the 9th.
So I will add my point, Madam Clerk, in explaining what I said earlier to members of the board, that once current members of the board's terms expire, the incoming members of the board will still need to make arrangements to be sworn in, which they could do so privately, and in order to make sure that there isn't a vacancy during any period of time on the board in those particular seats. So there will be a swearing in or not at that time, and official or not. And so again, it's up to us to decide if we should have that meeting on January 8th. Supervisor Cohen.
Thank you. I just wanted to add a little bit more context to the reason why I was opposed to January 8th. If I'm not mistaken, I recall the clerk of the board sending a memo over about a month ago, kind of explaining that there are costs associated with having a meeting on a Sunday. We would be paying overtime costs, as well as additional staff costs that I think it's unnecessary, and it might be could be considered frivolous spending for taxpayer dollars. So I have no strong position whether we meet on a Monday or a Tuesday. I believe that if we have it on Monday, then that probably alleviates the dilemma of a district being exposed and not having representation. If they choose not to do the private swearing in. And if that's the case, I'm willing to volunteer my time to swear the new members in so that there isn't a gap in service.
Madam President, just for clarification, the charter does require January 8th. The board rule only allows the next business day, which would be Monday the 9th, so Tuesday would be out of the question.
Okay, so Monday it is. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Cohen. Supervisor Tang.
Thank you. I don't see any other odd district folks on the roster, but so if that's the case, then I would like to make a motion to...
Wait a minute. No.
To trigger Board Rule 6.1 then, to allow our board meeting to take place on January 9th at 10 a.m.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Supervisor Cohen. And as an odd member of the board, I mean, I'm not certain. I'm torn. I mean, I want to be sworn in on the date that they specify, but I think it's really important that when you're a new supervisor, I just really would want to hear from new members of the board. And Madam Clerk, is there time to continue this item till next week and make a change at that time?
Absolutely, Madam President.
Okay, so I just really would like to do that instead. So would you like to withdraw your motion, Supervisor Tang?
Through the chair, I'll withdraw my motion if there's a commitment to really reach out and get the answers from the new supervisors.
Thank you. Yes, there will be.
And that's specifically on the inaugural meeting, not the rest of the calendar? Okay.
Okay, so thank you, Supervisor Tang. Supervisor Tang has withdrawn her motion. Supervisor Cohen.
What are you going to do if in the event you're unable to reach one of the supervisors elect?
Well, we're going to have to we'll make a decision next week at the meeting on December 13th.
So, I mean, with no disrespect, I'm going to push back a little bit. Are you going to be changing your mind between now and then?
I don't know. I understand, but I'd like to hear thoughts of other new members coming on board. As someone who came on board as a new member.
With a very special ceremony. We all recall how you came on board, President.
Yes, it will always be remembered. I just think it's important that, the bigger issue of why I did it was not because, like all of us as elected officials, we like attention, but I did it because I didn't want any member of the community to be turned away at the board chambers because the seating is limited here. And I just want to make sure that we use our best efforts, and I really want to hear from incoming members as to what they'd like to do so that we can make sure that we are a little bit more accommodating to them in this regard. And I'm just open to that suggestion. Okay. Oh, Supervisor Cohen.
Thank you. I don't want to speak out of turn. I guess one final plea. Madam Clerk, I don't really recall what exactly the total costs were to do something on a Sunday, but I just want to remind everyone that we are going to be dealing with the balancing issue with some of our priorities and our tax dollars. I mean, I think we should make every dollar count, and if we don't need to spend, then I don't think we should spend.
Okay. And what was the amount in the memo?
That amount was approximately $32,000. SFG TV, the sheriff, media services, our staff.
Yeah.
Well, never mind the continuance. Supervisor Peskin.
Are you serious? You don't want a continuance now?
I was just wondering what your thoughts were.
I was just going to make a motion to continue so we could get to the imperative agenda, but if you are now I, for one, don't care. But 8th, 9th, let's move on. If we want to take Supervisor Tang's made and withdrawn amendment, fine. If we want to have it on the 8th and whatever, it's...
Did you say $32,000?
Yes.
Come on. I thought that I must have missed a zero when I was looking at that.
I would like to remake Supervisor Tang's amendment as I originally suggested to you, Madam President, privately, and why don't we just have this thing on the 9th?
Okay. What about you, Supervisor Yee?
Oh, I just want to agree with everybody.
Okay. You're so easy. That's why you're my favorite.
You hear that, folks?
Let's go.
Okay, Supervisor Tang, what was your motion?
My motion through the chair was, as Supervisor Aaron Peskin suggested to you as well, was to invoke Board Rule 6.1 and have the meeting on Monday, January 9th at 10 a.m.
Okay, seconded by Supervisor Peskin.
And I do want to add, insofar, even though we all occupy nonpartisan offices, the truth of the matter is that we all are proud Democrats, and on January the 8th, the district assembly caucuses are happening right when our board meeting would be happening, and I would imagine that most of us would want to attend one or the other of those assembly meetings. And I also want to acknowledge that we earlier passed a resolution commending the remarkable decades-long service of Tom Owen, who has just walked into the chambers and is conferring with Buck Delventhal, our Deputy City Attorney. Congratulations, Mr. Owen, on your service. Thank you for many decades of incredible legal advice to this body and to every institution in this government. Your institutional knowledge will be sorely missed.
Mr. Peskin, we need to finish our item, and
I'm just getting it all done.
Okay. So Supervisor Tang has made a motion, and second by Supervisor Peskin. Colleagues, can we take the amendment without objection? Without objection, the amendment passes unanimously. And on the item as amended, colleagues, can we take this item, same house, same call? Without objection, the item as amended passes unanimously. All right, and thank you, Mr. Owens, and congratulations. All right, Madam Clerk, I know we have an imperative item. Oh,
Yes.
did you want him to speak or something, Supervisor Peskin? Did I miss something here?
I would love to, if you would be so willing.
Okay,
Madam
without
President, to give
objection,
Mr.
we
Owen
will
the
allow
floor.
Mr. Owens to say a few words.
Say thank you for this honor.
Mr. Owen, you have to turn your microphone on, sir.
Oh.
It's on. It's on. We just turned it on.
Thank you for this honor. I want to just say that the board hasn't always made my working life easy, but it has made it very interesting, and I've been very proud to work with the board and with the city. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Cohen. Okay. Supervisor Campos.
Thank you, Madam President. I just want to say to our distinguished Deputy City Attorney that it has been a pleasure to work with you. Thank you for the excellent advice and legal representation that you provide, and for always, being not just a great lawyer, but also good nature about how you interact with us. It's greatly appreciated, even under very stressful circumstances.
Thank you, Supervisor Campos. Supervisor Avalos.
Yes, I'd also like to thank you, Tom, for all your great work, and it's been really great to work with you all these years. Even before I was a supervisor, we worked on charter amendments together, and you taught me a lot about commas, and I really appreciate that. What I also, at times, asked you to be creative, and often we have a lot of city attorneys who do exactly what we ask them to do, and then if we don't tell them to do something, they don't provide us anything. But you actually took on some projects and used some of your creativity to make things happen. I really appreciate you going the distance with us on a lot of our charter amendments. And yes, we did not make your life very easy, but hopefully, yes, it was interesting, and that was fulfilling in your work, because your work with us was great. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Avalos. Supervisor Farrell.
Thank you. I just want to echo my colleague's sentiment, Tom. It's been awesome working together, and Prop B will stand out a lot to me in our time together. But I just want to say thanks for all the hard work you put into it. You've been an amazing asset. We're going to miss you.
Thank you. Supervisor Marr.
It's been such a pleasure to work with you, and you really deserve your retirement. But thank you so much and enjoy it so much, Tom. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Right. Seeing no names on the roster, we will go to our imperative item.
Okay. On behalf of Supervisor Cohen, an imperative item, a resolution affirming the San Francisco Board of Supervisors' support for the use of force policy unanimously agreed upon by the San Francisco Police Commission, and urging the San Francisco Police Officers Association to support the implementation of the Commission's use of force policy.
Thank you, Matt.
Supervisor Cohen.
Thank you.
We need to vote on the findings first. So is there a motion to move that this is purely commendatory and the matter was identified? Oh, would you like to state what the findings are?
Thank you. The motion is imperative.
Okay. And there's two findings that you certify that they need the action that needed to be taken place came. It's serious. It's a threat. It threatens serious injury to the public interest if the action is deferred to a later meeting and certify that under the Brown Act there was the need to take action immediate, and it came to the attention of the board prior to after the agenda was posted.
Yes, serious injury.
Okay.
In terms of public safety.
That's not a finding we can use.
You asked if it was going to have a serious impact.
Injury.
Serious injury, yes.
Thank you. Serious injury. Thank you. Okay. Would you like to move those findings?
Thank you. I would love to move them.
Okay.
As I mentioned earlier in my remarks,
Supervisor Cohen.
I'd like to move those findings.
Okay. Supervisor Cohen has moved those findings. Is there a second? Second by Supervisor Avalos. So we'll take those without objection. Without objection, they pass unanimously. And on the imperative item, Supervisor Cohen.
Thank you. I mentioned earlier in the introduction my remarks. This is a policy before the Police Commission. It's tomorrow evening. An action can possibly be taken. The action could be voted on by the Commission, which would be reaffirming their commitment to this policy. Alternatively, the Commission could shift their position and remove the prohibition on shooting at moving vehicles. The Police Commission's agenda was not published until Friday afternoon, which is why I'm introducing this as an imperative item today. And I also think it's critical that the Board of Supervisors take a position to affirm a support vote on this issue, as the Commission will be taking a vote on this issue tomorrow, and that will have a direct impact on the public safety of all San Franciscans. I want to thank, again, the co-sponsors, President Breed, Supervisors Kim, Avalos, Peskin, Marr, Campos, and Yee. I have circulated to you, I believe, a third version of copies and slight cleanup language and some amendments. First, Supervisor Yee, I have incorporated your grammar on page 1, line 5 and 6. Supervisor Farrell, thank you for your work with me on this. I have incorporated your further resolve clause on page 3, line item 19 through 22. And the rest, I believe, is self-explanatory and pretty straightforward. Thank you.
Okay, seeing no other names on the roster, we will open this item up to public comment. If there are any members of the public who'd like to provide public comment at this time, please come forward.
Tom Gilberti. I may not be able to make the Police Commission tomorrow. Wheelchair, this guy doesn't do well in the rain, and it's supposed to rain tomorrow. Shooting at a moving vehicle is probably an Annie Oakley shot. I'm personally would like that the police stop shooting at people, period. Bullets, tasers, rubber bullets. I would like to see us go in a direction where other countries exist with no guns on their policeman's belt. I think England is pretty civilized and they do that. So I am in favor of y'all passing the resolution. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other members of the public who'd like to provide comments at this time? Seeing none, public comment is now closed. All right, Supervisor Kim.
I just want to thank Supervisor Cohen and her staff for their timely work on putting this forward before the Police Commission meeting tomorrow, and glad to be supporting this today.
Thank you. Seeing no other names on the roster, Madam Supervisor Cohen.
Thank you, President Breed. Thank you, Supervisor Kim. I, too, want to acknowledge the incredible leadership that's come out of my office. We are a staff of 2 strong women right now, and I want to recognize Brittany Chiquata, who is the lead author on this, as well as Yo-Yo Chan. Thank you, ladies.
Thank you, Supervisor Cohen. And with that, colleagues, can we take this item, same house, same call? Without objection, this item passes unanimously. All right, Madam Clerk, please read the in memoriams.
Today's meeting will be adjourned in memory of the following beloved individuals. At the suggestion of President Breed and Supervisor Marr, on behalf of the entire Board of Supervisors, for the 36 lives lost in the tragic ghost ship fire, at the further specified suggestion of Supervisor Marr for the youngest victim, Drayvon McGill and Johnny Iguez, also known as DJ Nacht, and further specified by Supervisor Peskin for Jonathan Birnbaum.
Okay, that brings us to the end of our agenda. Madam Clerk, is there any other business before us today?
That concludes our business for today.
Thank you, everyone. We are adjourned.